Good morning, everyone. On June 7th, 2019, a resolution passed in the U.S. Senate that delegated October 28th, 2019 as honoring the nation's first responder day.
And we're here to celebrate National First Responder Day. These are the folks that are out in the community day after day, day in and day out. And we've really seen them step up during these COVID times. But think about, they're really the unsung heroes of when we're in crisis and when we need certain things. They're the ones that take care of us. So we would really like to celebrate today with an awareness of suicide within the first responder community is growing, it's ticking up, and we're here to talk about and normalize asking for help or seeking help. We want our first responders to be as well equipped with mental wellness as they can as their equipment. So let's just celebrate, and Tracy will talk about what First Responder Project is doing, and we've got two fabulous guests that we can't wait to speak with.
Thanks, Ann. First Responder Project is a 501c3 nonprofit that was originally, it was official in early this year, 2020, but we started last year in 2019. Ann and I have extensive experience working with military, and we have pivoted our knowledge that's been passed down from the military population, and really wanted to shift into our first responder community to broaden the gap, or to bridge the gap rather, and talk about wellness from an occupational model. First Responder Project has three main aims. That is to provide education, training, and outreach to our community, to our first responders, and to their families, to provide opportunities for peer connection, and to provide recalibration retreats. And so our focus today is going to be a series of interviews with first responders and family members so that you have an opportunity to hear firsthand their stories, and we hope that it compels you to provide support for them in any way that you can. You'll be able to find our website, firstresponderproject.org, available on the 904 Now. And I'd like to open up the conversation to Chief of Police Rob Hardwick and to Commander Scott Beaver with St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, Northeast District.
Absolutely.
Welcome,
good
gentlemen.
Morning. Yes, good morning, and thank you for having us on the show. And Pete, as always, thank you for having us and supporting us here in St. Johns County with 904 News, 904 Now. First of all, I tell you what, that footprint of first responders has truly grown, especially since COVID-19. That footprint has grown now into really recognizing those first responders in our hospitals, our first responders, our paramedics, our firefighters, and not just the men and women that actually are on the street working for law enforcement, but what's behind the scenes, our communications, our men and women that actually make our agency tick. So again, Dr. Hemanowski and Colonel Johnson, thank you for having us this morning on, again, and thank you for actually recognizing First Responder Day. It's kind of one of those unsung days that doesn't really get noticed. So again, thank you for having us. Commander?
Well, I don't know what I can add to that, Chief. When Robbie gets behind a microphone now, he's doing well. But it is so important to us that the people that we serve in this community understand what we go through every day, being on the front lines, and how it affects us, and maybe understand just a little bit. And the support that our community has given us through this COVID and everything else has just been overwhelming. In the area that I have the privilege to serve in, they absolutely bend over backwards for us, and we can't thank our community enough for all the support and love and guidance that they've given us.
Thank you both for being here. Can you speak a little bit about the exposures that first responders have in the line of duty that impact them both professionally and personally?
Go ahead, Commander.
Well, I tell you, every day that a deputy sheriff wakes up and that man or woman gets in that patrol car, the first thing is they don't know if they're coming home, if they're coming home injured. There's one constant, is change. So we don't know what that day or night is going to bring us. So that is always in the back of our mind. And as you could probably tell that probably bothers their significant other at home, worrying about what they're doing and what types of calls and situations they're getting put in. And so you have to prepare yourself mentally before you even crank your patrol car up to go to work to know, hey, if I'm in this situation, this is what I'm going to. So you go through your mental preparedness in your mind and think about the reps and experiences to rely on every single day that you're in that car. I can get into some scenes that we go to, and when today's scenes, as we all know, suicides in our community on the rise, and that's unfortunate. So that's one of our biggest calls we go to. And when you walk into one of those situations, you don't know what you're going to see, how horrific it's going to be, and the effects that scene has on. As a law enforcement, we got to focus on our job, what's happening, try and block everything out of our mind. We're there to do a job, provide a service, and be there for the loved ones and the family members. So that has a very big impact on us.
If I can add to that too, Doctor, one thing, we forget about what these men and women do, and we kind of take it for granted. The other night I was listening to the radio, and we had a bunch of units actually go to a crash on Interstate 95. There were multiple people injured. People were trapped in a car. One, as you know, the Glasgow level was at 3, which is pretty much, life-threatening. I mean, really. So our men and women go down this crash. They're directly involved with helping St. Johns County Fire and Rescue, and then I have to shift to St. Johns County Fire and Rescue. Their men and women are doing the same thing. They're seeing the same things we are. I just happen to listen to that same shift actually after that responds to a suicide threat where a suicide was in progress where a person is trying to end their life because of a horrific event that they're dealing with. I mean, these men and women get in the car, and not one time do we stop that situation or stop that shift and pull them out and make sure they're mentally fit, mentally stable. And I'm not just, those aren't the only calls too. I mean, we make arrests on, probable cause and based on, crimes being committed. And sometimes it's taken that parent or significant other out of the house where these families are watching that. I mean, if you think it doesn't affect us, it does. I mean, we've been doing this a long time, almost 30 years. Between the two of us, almost 60 years. And with that being said, there's so many things that we've seen. And I was in homicide for, almost 12 years. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of autopsies I went to where that's your job, by the way, and you go home. And we won't talk about the men and women that work those sex crimes, crimes against children, where we have to make sure they're mentally fit, mentally stable to actually not just do the job, but to go home and take care of their families and then go back to work and take care of the community. So I'm not sure everybody understands of what really goes on in that police car during a 12-hour shift or sometimes a 16-hour shift. And then I'm going to bleed over into dispatch into comms. I mean, think of taking that phone call or listen to that radio transmission where shots are fired, officer in a car crash, officer involved, in a critical incident where the person doesn't want to go to jail, or, an autistic person has left their family and we can't find them. I mean, so I can just keep going on. And that doesn't include the non-crime related calls where we go to the ocean responding to a distressed swimmer, where we're physically in the ocean trying to save someone's life that we don't know, by the way. It doesn't matter to us. And I have to brag on our profession and the fire and rescue people and the nurses, God bless them all. I mean, for what they do and being so mentally strong to continue to do it over and over again. But it becomes an addiction like an opioid, where we go to work because we're addicted to helping people. So.
There's a certain compartmentalization that needs to happen, physically, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, that when you're on the job, in the line of duty, that you have to keep everything in that box, or you have to put things in different boxes. And it's difficult to transition that when you go to your family, because your family is expecting you to be a bit of a dimmer switch when you've spent your whole day or your whole evening being a flip switch.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to the transition from in and out of uniform on a daily basis?
Sure. So, I'll start with that again. This is my 28th year approximately, and I wore multiple uniforms. So my military uniform, which I retired in 2018 after 25 years of service, was another type of uniform, but similar to first responder. And of course, the current uniform I wear now as a police officer, a law enforcement officer, and then I wear a third uniform, which is a coach. So when I go home, and then people forget that when we go home, we're also human. I raised 2 fantastic boys that are men that are doing phenomenal things, and I have a wife of 29 years going on our 30th year next year. I mean, juggling this stuff, and I don't want to. I'm going to put this into a context that's easy for our listeners and our viewers to understand that. Unfortunately, in this profession, you tend to put work first and God and family second. And whatever those second is, you don't really worry about. I hate to say that, but work becomes first. And that's why when we see this stuff on the media where they're attacking our police officers, and by the way, we do make mistakes. We do deserve to be arrested, just like every other profession out there. However, when you attack the entire profession of 890,000 of us that are do our job and love our job, and 99.9% do exactly like they're supposed to do, it's hard. So here you have to balance that happy medium, and you have to go home and be a father and be a husband, and be the things that we don't know sometimes how to do the best, because what we do the best is back in uniform. So again, transitioning out of that uniform into, let's say, plain clothes is sometimes the hardest part of life. And one thing I didn't understand in this profession was, and I'm so blessed in life to have a woman in my life that has just been so special and understands it and gets it. But we go home and we don't want to talk about it again. We don't want to relive that situation. We don't want to relive that suicide again, or that officer involved shooting again, or maybe that kid that's pinned in the car screaming for their life because they're pinned in the car in a car crash. And to go relive that again and again and again. This is a failure in the VA too as well. I mean, how many times is the VA going to talk to Rob Harwick about my combat experience so they can check the box on my VA forms now that I'm retired? I don't know. So again, we have to figure it out. We have to bring people just like you and Colonel Johnson into our and break that barrier, break that norm where we don't need you. Those days are over, by the way. And I think the bond that we've formed over the last year or two, or even more than that now, is so important, and our culture is ready for it, by the way. We are screaming for help from you, people just like you that want to understand and help us out. And we'll get into it in a minute, but what you two ladies have done for me over this last 2 years is you've given me medicine with my men and women, knowing that they were in great hands mentally, ready to come back to work.
Well, and I think that's important, just drawing a little bit on my military experience. The military would put behavioral health folks, a non-commissioned officer and an officer, into units, and they would train together, they would sleep together, and that helped to normalize when you knew who you wanted to go seek help to.
Sure.
It wasn't an unknown, and I think that's really very important. Chief, you've really stressed that.
It's one of those things that's it's hard to grasp, not just as a male, but in a profession where it's not the norm to seek help. We seek help in medicine from ourselves and laughing about things that are probably crude and maybe are not probably healthy, but that's how we vent, is we get back together and we talk about things and we laugh about it. And I'm talking things like we've seen a suicide. It's not that we're disrespecting the family, but that's how we vet to ourselves, and we understand it, we get it. And I challenge, people in this, when they say things like defund the police department or, do away with the blue. I mean, they gotta understand what we do is not all criminal. Matter of fact, it's such a small percentage of what we do. What we do, though, is we become social workers by default, because no one else gets there as quick as we do, and no one else wants to help people like we do. So again, there's a lot to process in our heads, but I would tell you this, and I think I'll speak for Commander Beaver too as well. If you were to tell me tomorrow morning that I could start this profession all over again and do something that I want and make twice the money, I would tell you I would start this profession all over again tomorrow morning, because I know we've made some difference in some lives. We've coached together for a long time, and we've touched this community. Matter of fact, I mean, there's kids out there now that, we chased their dads back in the day, literally, and now I get a chance to mentor those kids and make a difference in their life and make that's mental medicine for me. So, sorry, go ahead.
You're right, Chief. And, talking about our spouses, significant others at home, they go through the same thing, because we go home and we, like the Chief said, we put on this happy face. But how do we really deal with that when we get home? Is it exercising? Hopefully it's not taking a drink or doing something. And, that's tough on our families, but we have to find a way to cope. And over the last few years, through some tragedy at our own agency, we've had a couple of our guys take their own lives, and it's really, really hit home to us. And Sheriff Shore, we started a peer-to-peer group, and we're getting that up and running. So we have somebody on every shift, one or two people trained to recognize these signs and look, hey, somebody's, whether it's suicidal thoughts, whether it's, marital problems, financial problems. So we see this up front, and we start and give these men and women the help they need to get through those problems. Because you take this job home, and we all know that divorce rate in our profession is super high. So we have to make sure that we do everything we can to give these men and women the tools to deal with it at work and especially at home, because your family is all you have, and we want to make sure that they're healthy.
You think about, Chief, you mentioned processing. It's a lot to process, and I hear that quite a bit from people. that you just stuff things down and you just put it in that box to be reconciled at a later date. But that later date is just always later. You know, it's always free beer tomorrow sign in the bar. And if you think about what's in there, it could be a combination of psychological or emotional injuries from witnessing things, from showing up on a scene that renders you somewhat helpless. In other words, there's nothing more that can be done to preserve or rescue, preserve life. There's receiving trauma, you know, being shot at, having your life being threatened. And then what's unique to military and first responders is that they're sometimes participating in the very trauma. So if there's a shootout, you're participating in that, you're receiving trauma, you may be witnessing something else happening to kids or other innocent people. And so in one event, there can be a tremendous amount of content going on. And that's just 1 hour or one moment of a shift.
Yeah.
Then you have years and years of shifts. And so it's natural for, I think, for anyone to say, I don't know where to start.
Right.
You know, I've heard first responders and military alike say they've gone to talk to a professional and they'll say, well, what's troubling you? And then just kind of shake their head.
Yeah.
You know, how much time do you have? I don't know what's troubling me. I just feel a weight. I feel like I'm trapped under something heavy. My heart and soul are, you know, are just underneath a tremendous amount in that, you know, proverbial rucksack.
Right.
And how do we unpack that successfully,
Mm-hmm.
or at least redistribute the weight that you're carrying where it's manageable?
Sure.
Okay.
You know, one thing I'll tell you is, and I'll tell you that, you know, I've been in that dark place before, you know, where, you know, some decisions I made overseas in combat, and maybe some decisions I've even made here, you know, where it did take the life of a soldier overseas, you know, where Jeff Warshaw was killed in action with me in Baghdad University. But with that being said, you know, I come back home and sometimes you got to wake up and look in the mirror and you got to kind of get knocked down. You know, you got to get punched and you got to get knocked down, and sometimes you got to get back up, and you got to have your significant other sometimes or your coworker go to you and go, you better fix it because you're destroying your life. And I'm going to back up a little bit too and talk about the VA. And this is not a bashing contest on VA at all. But when I came in 2004, I was dealing with some stuff, just like everybody else. You know, we had 120 plus men over there, and we had 2 killed in action, and multiple other ones that had things going on over there during our 15-month combat tour. And then you got to come home and be a father again. By the way, they don't tell you how to get back into society. And that, by the way, while you've been gone, she or he, your other half, has been surviving while you're gone, because that's what life does. That's what society does, is they survive. So you come back home and you have all these issues in your head, and really, like I said, I didn't realize it until I needed help, and I reached out to somebody to get help, and the VA was not where I needed to go, because back then it was medication, and I'm not a medication type of guy. But you're exactly right, though, doctor. When you sit in there and says, "Tell me how you're feeling today," I can't tell you how I'm feeling today. There's one person in my life that can probably tell you if I'm right or wrong, and that's my wife. But even then, you know, she knows there's good and bad days in every profession. In our profession too, sometimes we don't want to talk about it. I don't want to relive again. So I'll give you a quick example. We had an officer involved shooting on Florida Avenue. It's probably been 3 or 4 years ago. I kind of giggle about it because the commander was actually at his old house in St. Augustine South, and we had multiple rounds fired on the island on the beach. He was on his porch eating dinner, cooking dinner. Remember talking about it later on, but there were some senior officers there, and there were some shots fired at me and another lieutenant, now lieutenant with the sheriff's office, Trey Edenfield, and it didn't even like bother us. He shot at us with an M1 Garand through the door. We were walking down the street. Our men and women were behind a car waiting, trying to negotiate with him, and then he opened fire on all of us with an M1 Garand. Multiple places in the house trying to shoot us because he knew we were outside somewhere, and then we returned fire and ended up ultimately killing the guy. And so after this is over with, we go back to the station. 2 things happen that now I had to go back and reflect on. They take all of our weapons away and our magazines and the patrol cars away while they're doing their administrative investigation. You forget that you just took away my livelihood. It didn't bother me. So me and a senior guy named Jim Parker, who's almost a 40-year veteran now, 30-year veteran at Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at the time, who was involved in multiple shootings. We go back to the office, by the way, at 2 o'clock in the morning, have a cup of coffee, eat a bagel, and nothing bothers us. And I had to think, wait a minute. The young female on the scene, who's now a detective at St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, she was just involved in a police shooting where someone tried to kill us. And they actually should all be dead, by the way the rounds were fired. I forgot about that. We just took her firearm away. We just took her, I'm not saying just her, there was multiple people that were taken away. And then we sent them home. this is where this process came in right here. This is where I said, okay, we need faith-based services. Jeff Gatlin has been a phenomenal man as a chaplain. And then this is where y'all came in, because I sat at my desk, went home and slept like a baby. It really didn't bother me. It probably did, but I didn't know it was bothering me. And I say that lightly, not saying that we're proud that we killed a person. It just wasn't psychologically taking effect in a hold, because I just had seen so much in my life. We're more hardened than the rest,
Right.
let's say. So anyway, so we fixed that process with bringing you in. So again, this is one of those things. It's a ever I never thought we would be here. If I were to tell you, him and I 28 years ago would sit here and talk about mental health, our partners would make fun of us. Seriously, they would. Or tell you that I was in a dark place and I got help. I'd be embarrassed to tell you that. Well, I'm not anymore, because I got help. 12 years ago. I don't drink. I don't smoke anymore. With that being said, and sometimes, like I said, you look in the mirror going, this is not Rob Harwick. This is some other person. And in here this is Rob Harwick.
Well, and I just want to commend you both. This is our senior leadership right here. And talking about this, the message that you're sending to new hires and people in the ranks, that's so important. Where some organizations will say, oh, suck it up, drive on.
True statement.
You're really doing wonderful work, because you're setting the tone and you're normalizing things, and it's okay to, go seek assistance.
Sure.
It is, Colonel. I remember the first time that I was made go to EAP, our Employee Assistance Program. I seen my first day as a shift leader. It was up in Ponte Vedra, and a young woman decided to take her twin 4-year-old boys' lives by killing them. And Sheriff Perry was the sheriff then, and Chief had mentioned that, the way we cope is we're on scene and we cut the fool, laugh, and joke to get our mind in a different place. Well, he called me and he said, when I get to that scene, there better not be a smile on anyone's face. And I remember, Sheriff, you don't have to worry about this one. And I sat in his car with him, and he said, I want you to go see somebody. I'm like, I'm good, Sheriff. You didn't hear me. So the three of us that were there went to counsel. And the first question I asked the doctor sitting in front of me, what makes you qualified to even understand what I'm fixing to talk about? And I say that to go back to what you were saying. We need your profession in our profession. Sitting in an office at our sheriff's office or going to our training, so we get to know you and we understand and we are relaxed and we feel that we can open up to you. And recently, I went back just as this peer-to-peer in our group. I said, I'm going to be the first person to go sit and talk to somebody. And after almost 28 years of this in your head, where do you start talking about? There's 28 years of suicides, car chases, fights, death scenes. I mean, how do you unpack it? Well, today I'm okay, but when I retire and I'm sitting out in the yard cutting grass, what if it all hits you? How do you unpack it? That's why we can't let our men and women pack that duffel bag so full. We got to take care of it right then, talk about it, get it out in the open, and help them heal from whatever problem they're going through.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pick up on something. I was a combat stress officer for over 20 years. And we did mental health by walking around. You don't sit in an office and wait for people to come to you.
Right.
You're out there meeting, talking, building relationships. So when the shit hits the fan, it's okay. I know somebody's got me, protected.
This is something that I can't thank you ladies enough of what you've done for my agency and for me, because, I lay in bed at nighttime and I just want to wake up in the morning time and make sure none of my men and women were hurt last night and they get to go home to their families. And I don't think people can actually grasp that, but I got a bunch of great young men and women at the St. Augustine Beach Police Department and now inheriting a much larger agency. And if you don't think we go to bed at nighttime worrying about that, then come live in this hamster wheel of my head. But, with that being said, and I know I've made a kind of a funny comment to you two ladies over the last couple of weeks. Can I afford you? That's a stupid question, because how much does a life cost, right? If I lose one deputy sheriff, we've been there, by the way, and you're going to talk about that in a minute with Jeff. But, with that being said, one life is too many with us. So if I can just save that one life, that one person, because what that does is when something like Jeff happens, man, it is such a trickle effect where it really destroys a lot of people, especially the ones that are close to him and live that life. But we can all be in that dark place, by the way. And some of us have been there and just never admit it and won't admit it. However, with that, you know, with if this thing were to ever take off and the program that I have in my head and you have in your heads. And Colonel, you said something so important, and I know you started doing ride-alongs with my men and women. You broke that bond, and I hate to say that you get in a car and you kind of cuss and cut up, but that's where you, because by the way, they see you as an outsider that doesn't know the profession. That's where they see you. By the way, you're an outsider trying to break into my mind, and you're going to ruin my career by telling my boss that I'm not mentally stable. We fix that at my agency. I know the two of you talked to a couple people outside of work, and they've called you without me saying you're going to talk to them. And that would just be even better if you were in-house and you were seen in the hallways. You were in a briefing. You went outside today, grabbed your bag, and jumped in a patrol car and got that bond going. Colonel, you talked to one of my combat veterans who's a police officer now. He's a Purple Heart veteran times 2.
I know.
Blown up in a striker that shouldn't be alive today. And you touched that young man, because we don't talk to people. And to be even more frank, it's almost like, to me, talking to a lady, it's like, God, I'm getting ready to confess my soul to a woman now that, you know. So we've come a long ways, and we're going to get better. I promise you. That's a thing that I kind of honed on as running for sheriff in St. Johns County, and we're going to move forward with the next step. And listen, we're doing the best we can taking care of the community, but we're not doing any good taking care of our men and women.
Yeah.
Dispatch too, communications too, jail too.
Well, and I'm going to, PMCS, Chief, what does
Sure.
that mean to you?
Sure, absolutely. That's a preventive maintenance checks, right? Which we don't do. We're not doing that preemptive strike on taking care of men and women. It's always the after effect. Oh, you guys saw a suicide? Let's talk about it. No way. Let's talk before about that.
Right.
When you get that smell of a suicide or a gunshot or an autopsy or watching videos of people that commit crimes against children, we have detectives that do that all day long. You don't think they need to talk to somebody daily? Monthly's not enough. That's a daily talk. That's walking in that division going, hey, just checking on you, Tracy, just checking on you. And you guys doing okay? You've watched 6,000 videos today of kids getting raped. I'm exaggerating, but we're not too far from that.
No.
And you think they go home mentally stable? I don't know. I've never done it. I can't do it. So
We hear the word weak. You know, I don't want to appear weak. I don't want people to think I'm lesser than. I'm not able to hack it. But if you have to have an exquisite sense of humanity to do this job
agree.
well and to want to do it and
I
keep
agree.
putting the uniform on. So, you know, we'll hear in some other interviews later on that were pre-recorded about the nature of the beast. It is what it is, and so we really want to focus on taking things out of the medical model. So taking all the psychobabble and the medical and the diagnoses and all that nomenclature and just not being worried about that, because that's
Sure.
not what we need to be worried about. We need to take it out of the social model and all the stigma that comes from there as well, with people, you know, words like weak, and instead put it in the occupational model.
Yeah.
So if we think someone is in the medical model, we would say, oh, he or she is hypervigilant, as if there is something, you know, too vigilant, too aware. In the social model, we'd say they're paranoid. Oh, stop being paranoid. Even family and friends, stop being paranoid. Why are you looking around? Looking at the opportunities for ingress egress options and what could happen, worst case scenarios, and then in the occupation model, it's just situational awareness.
Right.
So taking all that language from those other realms and neutralizing it, and that's, I think, where we start with education with mental health providers. We're going to be having some what we call like thin line training for all first responder walks of life, to bring people in, to get them hands-on and experiencing some things, but also hearing firsthand from people, because not all providers are going to be comfortable hearing those stories either.
Sure.
Some of them are going to be traumatized by hearing about trauma stories. So we really want to bring the providers in who are compelled to do this type of work and are willing to put in the sweat equity
I totally agree.
to learn about it.
Totally agree.
Same thing with our retreats, bringing people in, which we hope to start with funds raised from today and afterward, bringing people in and just talking about recalibrating, figuring out how to reconcile what's there. How do you communicate with your loved one about your shift without going into that trauma box, without talking about the threat that occurred, without talking about tragedy? I think a lot of times we underappreciate how much tragedy exposure first responders get. That it's just, sometimes your heart is just heavy and you're filled with sorrow on behalf of other people. And so we don't want to think of it as weak, but, you know, first responders, I think, are very tenderhearted. They can, you know, sense of humor can be
It's the
very
best.
politically incorrect, very gallows humor and all that.
humor.
And that's just a coping
It is.
mechanism.
We do that in the mental health biz as well.
If you have a compassionate heart, it's going to get bruised.
I agree.
It's going to get beat up. It's going to get stepped on. And so it's a matter of just doing that Prev Med and figuring out, or Prev Maintenance rather, and just figuring out how to just keep on maintaining a quality of life in your personal life and doing the job well and making sure that you're on an even keel,
And
which is
And the retreats that we've been doing for probably 7 years now,
that was nice.
she sucked me into it. But it's that disconnection from the responder and then the family member. And we see that over and over again. You'll go home and isolate because you don't want to bring what you've seen and felt home. So you isolate, and families like, but I want you to participate. We love you. Your kids want your dad, your mom. And I think that's a big thing with the retreats, that we, instead of turning away from folks, we want them to turn in to each other and themselves. So I think a big part of it is that let's reconnect. Let's find that joy.
Sure. This profession is it's ruthless, it's relentless, and it's rewarding. And one thing for me, and I know Colonel, you and I have been talking about this. You tried to get me on a retreat forever, and it's no disrespect to you. It's a hard line to cross for me, because sometimes it feels like it's all about us. Sometimes it's not about us. We protect a community, we serve a community, and sometimes, unfortunately, caring about us takes a backseat, silent role. And again, I've tried to do something with the two of you over the last few years, and Dr. Tina Jekyll before that. And it wasn't about me, but I don't want anybody to know about it. But with that, you just said something too. Success of our men and women is not just with you two joining our agency. It's financial counseling. It's having that attorney on staff that you can go talk to and have your power of attorney made up, or your last will and testament, whatever it may be. Getting your life in order for that horrible day. By the way, the horrible day probably will not happen on the job. It'll happen on 95 driving, or just just accidents happen in life, and when your time comes, it comes. So again, I'm looking forward to partnering up with you two and seeing what we can do for the better of the agency. This isn't about me, but really it is about me. I want to be able to go home at nighttime and go to bed at nighttime, be able to put my head down knowing that I've done everything I can do possibly to take care of my men and women in every aspect of our agency, not just the law enforcement deputies on the road, but in our corrections, the men and women that work in the office, because they deal with they're under pressure just like we are. They read the reports, they watch the videos, they see the agonizing, things that we deal with, and comms too as well. So again, there's a bigger pitch in this, and St. John's County Fire and Rescue super excited about partnering up with Chief Pravat and his men and women, because we leave them out sometime. And I know you guys reached out to Carlos Avalis, Chief Avalis. You listen well. I made recommendations, and we appreciate you. I don't know what your ultimate goal is, to maybe take over the county
World domination. Yeah.
or run for sheriff. I don't know what you guys are up to.
No.
No, thank you.
No, I qualified barely. I beat the dietitian out. I love to go out and fire, but not to qualify.
Invite us to the range anytime.
Yes.
Of course. Well, you kind of laugh at that, but that's something that, we talk about, that in order for you to be accepted in this profession, you got to come do the things that we do. If you just show up when a critical incident happens, you're going to fail. I'm going to fail. So with that, again, we talked about the ride-alongs and stuff where you can break up in the car and they find out you're human, and, you can cut up and cuss, I call it, in the car with them, and be humans. You come out to the gun range and you shoot some rounds with us, or, come to our sim house and do some training. Again, that's how you break that barrier. You don't break the barrier from your office, you're going to lose.
That's one of the things we want to do with the thin line training, is to be able to have firsthand narratives given by folks who are in their professions, but also combining it with the Citizens Academy and different, I don't know if it's if that's what you call it.
Yeah, it's actually, we're going to kick it back off in January because of COVID again. This has been an odd year for us, but yeah, we're going to kick off that Citizens Law Enforcement Academy just after the first year. By the way, when I'm walking in, knocking on doors, during my election, that was the one thing. It's like, we went to that Citizens. I mean, and the commander knows this too. They tell my staff, we went to that Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. It gives you a little bit of taste of what our men and women do. Pretty impressive.
Commander, what would you ask for from the community This is an opportunity for them to hear today, particularly on this National First Responder Day, about the lives of first responders. What would you like the community to know about how they can assist first responders?
I think our community, we're lucky in St. Johns County. Our citizens already do so much for us. It's not even funny, and we appreciate that. Just sit back for a minute. We, from time to time, we work complaints on our deputy, and, we'll get a call in, hey, Commander, one of your deputies was rude to me on a traffic stop, and, I was probably speeding. And I said, and I try and help them understand. Well, it's 11 o'clock. Did you know when that deputy checked out, the first thing was a bad wreck on the interstate where 3 people died? As soon as they cleared that, they went to a call where somebody had OD'd, and they administered 3 shots of Narcan and brought that person back. And then the next call was a domestic violence where a woman had been beaten and there was 3 kids in the house. And then you blow by this deputy speeding and they pull you over. Do you think they may be a little frustrated or not, they're normal? I'm not saying it's okay to be rude, and it's not, but just think about what that deputy may have been through that day. And you have pulled over for speeding. We all do it, it's okay. But just have a little empathy and compassion like we do. No matter what we're going through, when that next call comes out, no matter how we just felt about, we're going to the next one, we're putting our game face on and we're taking care of business. That's what we do. The chief's right. We wake up every day to serve and protect this community. It's what makes us go. I miss being out on the street all the time. That was so fun, and chasing people and doing the things. But just continue to support us. Always, people here love us, and just continue that support and show us that outcry of love that they have for us. And it really is, it feels good inside, when we know that we have that support.
It's really about perspective. So for first responders, as someone once said to me, my goalposts have been moved and I can't get them to go back together.
Right.
Like desperately want this to be the range of humanity to inhumanity.
Yeah.
For him, it was way out here.
Sure.
And so I think that for people on the line of duty, the perspective is both the gift and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
That you can really think about what's important and what there is to complain about, not complain about. So you get that gift in that way of everything's relative to other things. But when the goalposts are out here, and the community can't see that. They can't see how that first responders day's bookended. They just see what's going on with them
Right.
in that moment.
Right.
So asking people to consider that this person could have had just a phenomenally traumatic exposure prior to their interaction with them. I think that's a really great thing to make people aware of.
Yeah, we are truly blessed. So, like the commander said, our business relationship and partnerships we have in our community, we are so blessed. Matter of fact, last night we were at an event over in Clay County. They had a canine seminar. Of course, during COVID, we've had the training has really, and funding, everything has just been upside down. So last night we actually went over there. We had a special invite, St. Johns County Sheriff's Office with Canines United, Debbie Johnson. She's done a phenomenal job. This woman is part of law enforcement now because on October 14th of 2014, Canine Barron was murdered. He was the dog was released. He was on a chase. He was chasing a robbery suspect on a warrant, and the suspect, he caught the suspect ultimately, and the suspect drowned him in a pool of mud and water. And with that being said, this lady, Debbie Johnson, comes on board, opens a not-for-profit. The not-for-profit goes up and down, up and down. And last night we sat there and watched all these sponsors who paid for every one of these deputy sheriffs. One young lady was from UNC, not Chapel Hill, but I think Raleigh campus. She drove down with her dog for free training. So all these vendors and business partners paid for this training. They didn't pay for one night, one thing of food, nothing. Everything was paid for by these independent donations.
Mm-hmm.
So our community loves us, respects us. I think it reciprocates back. They know that. They know that when we do have a bad officer or deputy sheriff, we're going to weed him or her out. And sometimes they just don't rear their head enough. But we do the best we can based on the resources we have. And if the public doesn't speak up, then we won't know. But sometimes that's on us for not providing that specialized counseling or that specialized financial counseling, or maybe weren't paying attention. They're going through a divorce or going through a crisis. So that's one thing we got to get better at too as well in law enforcement, because ultimately we have to put that smile on, put the uniform on, walk out that door and provide the excellent service and, above the standard of service that we provide.
Yeah, and I think that goes back. I think, Commander, you had talked about it. it's really knowing your people and being able to look them in the eye when they report in and knowing there's something off.
Yep.
And reaching out and saying, hey, what's going on? And they're more likely, and especially with that peer-to-peer model, they're likely to, you're going to be the first ones that they turn to if they're noticed. And they may be throwing out all kinds of flags or signs. But I think it's important for the corporals, the sergeants, to understand that your job is to take care of your people.
Yeah.
And if that is spread throughout the organization, you've got half of it licked.
Yeah. Good point.
But it's that code of silence. Suck it up and drive on. Don't want to hear about it. Don't care. That's when things really go upside down.
And I give credit to Debbie Smith, who's one of our lieutenants, and she really started this program in the comm center, and it's been unbelievably successful with them. So we kind of stole this from Debbie and just put it on the road, and not only on the road, it's in corrections, it's in our admin, and it's everywhere in the sheriff's office. Somebody in every discipline is trained to watch, and look out for our men and women. It's not patrol, it's not corrections, it's us, it's a team, it's a family, and we're a big family. Ask anybody that's ever went through a death of a family member, of divorce, something. We come together when it's time to come together, and we take care of our men and women that work at the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office.
And just to give a plug, we're going to have Debbie Smith's going to be in our evening hours and talking about her experience coming from EMS to comms. And I think the one thing that I've struck about for folks in communication and dispatch is they don't hear old Paul Harvey the rest of the story. I think closing that loop sometimes would be very beneficial for them.
Yep.
Sure.
They just a phone call from, they on the radio can hear us saying we need backup, we need help. And after it's over, just get on the phone and say, hey, thank you. We're all good here. That's all they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The unique thing about that job too is that there's no visual.
No.
So there,
Make
in
it
the
up.
absence of a visual,
Yeah.
you create a visual, and
Yes.
that visual might be even more traumatic or substantial than it could have been. But
Yeah.
not being able to have closure. And the same for other first responders is that you put them in the rig, you put them in the ambulance, and you just don't know. And so you kind of carry. There's always that ...
Yeah.
Not quite knowing if everything worked out okay. Having a lot of hope, but also knowing from experience that things don't always work out the way
Sure.
you want them to.
Well, in
Yeah.
our culture too, if you don't give us the information, we're gonna make it up,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's not good for this culture,
No.
And I'm
No.
talking about culture as society, culture, not just law enforcement.
And
Mhm.
it just not to do a lawyer joke, but they're the ones that step in when the ... isn't closed.
Sure.
And I know your son's a lawyer, Chief.
Yes. I don't know what happened with that one, by the way, since on that topic.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. What is flashing down there?
What? Just my phone.
Okay, gotcha. Just make sure it wasn't a IED. We'll go
No,
back
no,
in
no,
PTSD
no.
mode here.
No, I would let you
Okay.
know. If
Okay,
I'm gonna,
please.
I'm gonna throw
We've
She's
talked,
Navy.
frag grenade. I'm gonna.
Navy, yeah.
Lieutenant Commander.
Yes. We talked so
Former.
much about law enforcement. The chiefs mentioned about our fire rescue partners, and I cannot think of any other county that has the relationship that we do, whether it's at a traffic crash, a structure fire, a drowning on the beach, or planned events like TPC, or what. We work so close together, and that bond and that relationship, if they're hurt, we're hurt. If we're hurt, they're hurt. So, and I can't thank them enough for their response and relationship that we have with them. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and they're leaning forward in the foxhole.
Yep.
By far.
We've worked with Chief Pravat and Chief Whaley, and we've done ride-alongs with the city, and it's a big community, but each one is a integral part of the puzzle piece to be out there for the community.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I was thinking of something when you said the ride along. with the pendulum has swung a little bit, with females being in law enforcement much more than when him and I started. And Congressman Rutherford and I were talking today. When he started in 1974, he said there were three females in the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. Now I couldn't even tell you what the number is, probably over hundreds over there. Excuse me. That being said, you almost felt like that cultural change that was going to change, that we were going to be like a more softer of a profession. I disagree with you. Our females are, and you've rode with some of them, they're hardened. And of course, I love them like my kids, but I honestly thought we were going to see this awful shift, and we were going to be hugging and crying at crime scenes together. No, it's changed. The females are just so hardened and have brought a new perspective to our agency, to our profession, to the communities. And with that, it's again, it's one of those things too, is that you thought we would share a commonality where things that upset us and that upset them, there would be more. I disagree. I mean, it's pretty cool to see, and them in our profession too has added to that demographics of society, especially in St. Johns County where we're over 50% female dominant. But man, these ladies, my hats are off to them, because I worried about them at one time more than I worried about my males. I've gone back to the guys. The guys have issues. The girls are handling it.
Yeah, they will take care of business a lot quicker than our guys sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
They're fast, and
Special.
They will handle business.
Love them kids.
As part of our last month when we had our summit, our second annual summit, an offshoot of that was a family forum, which we've continued every month, and also a mental health provider training that we had on a separate day. And one of those evolutions was a women in uniform panel.
Oh yeah.
And we had maybe 7 or 8 women, phenomenal, from all different line of duty professions.
Yeah.
And just a really great conversation. So we'll be repeating that. We were able to record that, and so we'll make that a really important part of our clinician training, because I think they're under recognized sometimes.
Yeah, not with us here in St. Johns County. Every time I get a chance, and I think Colonel, I've spoke to you about this numerous times. I promote them, I gloat them, I advertise them. I think it's impressive. And matter of fact, if you've kind of seen, majority of the females that were working with me at the St. Augustine Beach Police Department have left and gone to the sheriff's office in hopes that I'll be there in the very near future, which it looks that way.
I hope so. So we've talked about different levels of stigma. Talking about mental health, there's a social stigma that we still aren't as comfortable. We're getting better, but not as comfortable yet. There is an institutional level within first responders, even departmental or agency, and then there's personal stigma of, I don't know if I can be that person to cross over the line of a chaplain's office or a clinician's office. At the same time, we are there is wonderful camaraderie within the ranks, within different professions, but still almost this culture of silence. If I'm not going to say anything about me, you're not going to say anything. But if I also that kind of hypocritical posture of, if you told me you were struggling, I would be on it. I would be there for you. I wouldn't think less of you. I would get you whatever you needed. But I can't imagine you would think of me that way. I can't imagine being seen as just heavy, just weighed down with things.
Sure.
So we really need to kind of keep working on that, figuring out ways that first responders can communicate in safe ways with their significant others, so they're not frightening them and concerning them in terms of what happens on the job, but at the same time being able to come home and not put on a facade. To be able to show that burden when it's there, and for our families to be able to share that burden in a way they can. Our hope with First Responder Project is, and we've been successful thus far in being an external entity to different departments and agencies. Our advisory board is, of course, all those who walk the walk. If we would be remiss not to have military and first responders as every part of our organization, but we're really looking to improve quality of life, to make sure that we can stem the tide of suicide, that we can improve functioning, not just on the job and being operationally ready at all times, but making sure that when you do come home and you feel numb, there's a way to still engage and be present, not just be physically present, but psychologically and emotionally present. That's what families are waiting for. They want their first responder to walk in the door first and foremost unharmed, but then they want to be engaged with them, and be able to appreciate it. So we greatly appreciate you
Thank
both
you for
being
what you do.
here. It says a lot about how you value your men and women and value the mental health of the force.
Going back to your last comment, it's I've heard us say it's okay not to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to say the word suicide. It's
Mhm.
okay to say I have problems, and the new incoming sheriff can say it. I can say it. Anybody in his staff is going to. If we say it and we know there's problems and we say we have problems, that people below us are going to say, "Oh, it's okay."
Mm-hmm.
It's a culture change for us, and the more we talk about it, the more we do it, the more it's going to come out, and the better our men and women are going to be for that.
Absolutely. There's no shame in saying my cup is full when you are the man or woman in the arena.
Totally
And
agree.
I mentioned that in
Yeah.
another interview later on today, that there's nothing but pride really that should be had by saying I'm full.
Yeah.
I've got to data dump. I've got to decompress. I've got to recalibrate. I've got to just take my cup and just share it or put it somewhere else for later, or divide it up, whatever that looks like.
Sure.
We are very humble to the idea that it's very, very difficult to kind of break the seal of
I agree.
that cumulative trauma, but at the same time, no one likes to feel numb and
I
empty
agree.
because that's a
Mm-mm.
precursor to suicide.
Sure.
Isolation is a precursor to suicide.
And
so-
I think it's that fear. If I open up, what the heck's going to come spilling out?
Sure.
Mhm.
And can I put it back?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, sometimes I'm glad you said that, Colonel, too, because, sometimes in this profession you say things and you can't undo it. But I will tell you this, all the first responders that are listening, for every profession that you're working, or if you're not a first responder, if you need help, you got to reach out. You got to look in that mirror and say, I need help, because we can't help you until you reach out to us. So that being said, everybody knows how to get a hold of me. It's very easy. You call the dispatch now and they'll patch you to my phone. My phone is on 24 hours a day and I'll get you in the right direction. We have so many resources here in St. Johns County between our veterans, if you are a military veteran, or some of the resources. And I hope you put those numbers out in those places that we can get help here in St. Johns County. But hey, don't be embarrassed by it. I'm sure you're going to talk to Kristen Carroll. She's got a story. She's lived that horrific event, and we never would have. Him and I would tell you right now that you never could have lined Jeff up and go, which one is hurting the most? Man, he's a big, bear, strong guy. Always has a smile on his face. Wise guy. That's the one that did it, by the way.
Mhm.
That's the one we wouldn't have picked out of that line that day. And then now Kristen and our agency are dealing with that, which again, you guys will, I'm sure we'll talk about
Well,
that later on.
and I think, to reframe, and I think for a lot of folks, out of tragedy comes new ideas and taking care of people.
Yep.
And a way to make sense of what happened.
Sure.
And, having been privileged to be able to talk to a lot of the St. Johns County folks, that was kind of the watershed moment, wake up call.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
better get moving on something.
Sure.
Yep.
We have some work to do though, Colonel. It's so easy to say, like the commander said, we have EAP. Yep, we sure do. Okay, we're going to give you a number that you can call. But what are we doing more than that?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We're going to make this robust. Sheriff Shore went in this direction. Didn't get a chance to complete everything going on this past year, but we're going to finish it. And I hope you two can steer us in the right direction to see what do you need instead of talking. We're so quick to talk about it. It's like, yeah, we're doing that. We got a policy in place. We got a number they
Yeah.
can call. And you know what? We'll send the chaplain by. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going beyond that. And you've seen me do that with my agency at a smaller level. Now let's bring it up to the next level and make it work and save a life.
And any time that we can take that healing, opportunities for healing and decompression into like outside too, into a retreat model, getting out in nature,
Mhm.
spending time with, having some rise and fall, and spending time on the water as we do, spending time with animals.
Sure.
And that's where we're looking for also support from the community, not only to implore people to recalibrate their perspective about what might be happening, but also to show appreciation, whether it's showing up at an event, whether it's, we would love for folks to donate to First Responder Project. 100% of donations are going directly to services like retreats,
Right.
like training for behavioral health providers to have a more robust list.
I don't know, provide coffee for a training.
Sure.
For the retreats, in kind, sponsor a meal.
Mhm.
And again, we know how to do this stuff, and it's not at a 5-star luxury hotel on the beach, Embassy Suites. It's really more of a campy, and you're not chasing shiny objects, but you're there and within nature and doing some things maybe that you haven't done before.
Mhm.
And we advocate a post-traumatic growth model in the way we conduct business, that through people struggling, there's that opportunity to get stronger.
Sure.
And really start to see what's important in life.
I agree.
And it's important for us too that we have real talk. So the reason that it's campy and it's a very humble environment is so that we can be wearing jeans and t-shirts and ball
Yeah.
caps and
Right.
talking and relating as human beings. We see in the retreats that we currently run, we see such an enormous shift in 3 days from people who come in and just kind of reluctant. What's this mental health thing all about? Am I going to regret this? To a few days later of, I think I actually might go talk to someone. I probably need to sort some things out, unpack the ruck.
Right.
And
It's usually the third meal. And we eat a lot of Publix fried chicken. You know.
breaking bread 3 times. That's
Yeah.
our rule.
I'm
of
okay
thumb.
with it. I'm okay with breaking bread. I like fried chicken
Yeah.
from Publix.
Oh, I love Publix
Okay.
fried chicken. I'm a fan. But anyway.
Any final thoughts before you leave us today and go back to the
No,
day in the life?
again, we, Colonel Johnson and Dr. Hedman. I was almost called you Hesmanowski. Why am I stuck on that? We got to we got to send with we got
It's
to
Tracy.
end with a little bit of positivity. And the Colonel's over there laughing. Hemanowski.
It is.
We've been friends a long time, and now you want to correct me today. But anyways, and I'm
Well-
over here. This is kind of bothering me because the commander and I actually have both our gum on my water cap, my water cap,
Been
and I want to make sure it
disturbing me
doesn't.
this whole time.
Well, I want to make sure it doesn't spin. I love the guy; he's like my brother. But I try to put my cap on my water numerous times. But on a serious note, thank you for having us. Thank you for what you're doing. We totally need this resource. We got some work to do. That's a challenge from me to you. And you tell me how to make our agency better. You tell me how to protect our men and women better. And I'm going to tell you we're going to do it. And I think at no cost, I think our taxpayers would say, okay, it costs this amount of money. Why aren't you doing it, really, in the big scheme of things? So thank you for what you do. Thank you for watching over us and protecting us. And God bless our first responders.
Yeah, I agree, and I echo that. We're all in. We have to. We can't not do this for our people, but our spouses. Thank goodness our spouses look out for us. I've been with my wife for 25 years, and I wouldn't be here without her. And the community, we really still need that support of our community. It helps. We have an 84% approval rate in St. Johns County for our law enforcement. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Huge.
But our spouses, our community, our brothers and sisters, and you, this is easy. We can make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Yeah, and thank you for taking time out of your day to, as they used to say in the military, jaw jack with us.
Absolutely.
Navy doesn't know that word.
I think that was an officer term. We didn't jaw jack. We actually,
Wow.
I can't stand. I
I
can't
am,
stand the arrow.
I am prior service.
Oh yes, ma'am. Sorry, my apologies, Colonel Hemanowski.
Would you like to introduce our next interview with Kristen?
Yeah, we alluded, when we talked about Jeff and Kristen.
Yep.
It was 18 months ago.
Oh my goodness, it was
2
yeah,
years?
COVID got messed up.
2018.
Here.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
2018.
Yep,
Yep, it's
2018.
been- Yep.
So about 2018, one of the detectives.
Actually, we're closing on 2 years right now.
Yes,
Okay. 2 years, and Jeff was a detective.
he was.
He was a narcotics detective. Yep.
And his son had completed
Committed suicide just before.
suicide
Yep.
right before this happened. And he was carrying a lot of stuff, and he had told his wife, don't say anything. I know the agency had reached out to him, and he said, don't tell them anything, which really kind of put her in a double bind. If I tell, what's going to happen. And Jeff followed through and completed suicide. And his wife, Kristen, who we're going to hear from next up, really has been, I know that the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, as a family, reached out to her and supported her. But she's really been on the front lines and taking tragedy and really turned it into some positive change.
Yeah. God
She
bless her.
speaks at the Academy for new hires.
Every one of our new hires classes
Yes.
she speaks at. Yes,
And
ma'am.
she's a big supporter of ours, and she'll give a raw interview about what it's been like for her over these 2 years. And she's angry, sad, and was she was left with 2 daughters, to pick up with them. And I applaud this woman. She's very courageous, and but she's a big supporter first responders.
By far.
And I think will continue to be, a trailblazer with trying to prevent suicide and not tertiary, which is, at the end, go see EAP.
Yep.
Right.
So we're privileged to have had Kristen, do she did a pre-recorded with Dr. Himanowski.
Well, I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank Pete Melfi. He is behind the scenes and running our show today for us. So he is, we can't even see it. We see his hand, thumbs up.
Yep.
And Pete, if you want to go ahead and cue that interview with Kristen, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. And I want to thank you very much for being a part of our fundraiser for First Responder Project. Appreciate your time, and we'll jump right into the conversation.
Okay.
So Kristen, can you tell us about your experiences as a law enforcement spouse, a law enforcement officer spouse, and in particular, your personal experience with the loss of both your son and your husband?
Okay. So, as a spouse, I will say, I learned a lot about what law enforcement officers deal with every day. Jeff Carroll was my spouse, and he was a detective for the show St. John's County Sheriff's Office. And we were married 5 years. So as a spouse, I learned just kind of like more stuff maybe than I wanted to sometimes, just the things that they deal with on a daily basis and the things that they see, which kind of made my world a little, like, I wouldn't considered myself naive before, by no means, but it really opened up my world to maybe I was a little bit. And just to see, like, wow, like there's so much that he has to deal with every day. Well, all of them, but personally for me, like what he has to deal with every day being a law enforcement officer. So, I mean, as a spouse, you really try to be supportive, but sometimes it's just hard because I'm not built as that person, the way he was, or people that are law enforcement officers to deal or hear with, or even hear about some of the stuff that they have to deal with. And so, I learned a lot through that, which we'll talk about later. But then moving on to the deaths of my son, it was my stepson, it was Jeff's son, but, it's our children. And Jeff, through suicide, and they both took their own life not quite 3 months apart in 2018, September and December of 2018. And with my son, he didn't live with us. He was, older. He wasn't a young child. And so there wasn't really answers. There are a lot of questions, as there often there are. With Jeff, I have a lot deeper insight to what was going on even prior to deaths and prior to suicide, and during that hard time. So that's something that I could definitely share.
We appreciate you doing that. It's a devastating loss to lose one person to suicide, and of course, as you said, you lost both your stepson and your husband in a very short period of time. What, for our listening audience, that's a lot to imagine bearing in the heart and soul. What types of experience, reflecting back on your husband's last few months on the job, were there signs or anything about demeanor or things that, of course, as you look back in hindsight, that you recognize and that you notice?
So I will say, before losing our son, demeanors just and stresses from, and I always like to talk about this, just from the job in general, you could, there's some stress that I could recognize that was taking place, and that he talked about, like I was saying earlier, that we would talk about, and we talked often about outlets for that me as a spouse, going back to what I was saying, like I'm not built for some of those stories, some other outlets that could be helpful for that, which I feel they all need. But then once the added stress and devastation from losing a son, just anyway. But suicide, it has, it has different challenges too to dealing with loss like that. I did recognize withdrawal. That was like the biggest thing that I recognized because we were just best friends and he talked to me about things. I mean, everything. That's who we talked to. We were always doing things together, and I saw not just him not speaking, but withdrawal physically go into other rooms. And when we're both dealing with what we deal with, it's really hard to go, well, is it that just because he lost his son? Like is that normal? You just want to be left alone? Um, and we talked about it, and there were times in the beginning that knowing what I know about suicide, that was out up front. His father was up front. We asked the question, are you thinking that way too? Are you feeling that way? And at the time, he probably was not. And he said no. Maybe it was and just didn't want to say anything. I don't know. Mental health is so fragile, especially when you go through something like that. And so, but the withdrawal was a big thing. It was big that I noticed that I would bring up and say, now, if you need time alone, I understand, but just know, like, I'm here and that we have to do this together.
Mhm. Were you able to address some of the things that you did notice? Was it difficult to start a conversation about that when you're thinking about just looking back on Jeff's career and your time together? When were there times that you could tell that something was stressful for him, that something was weighing on him? Were you able to approach him with those things, or was it just understood that you're there, when he needed a sounding board?
So before or after or both?
Both.
Both. Yes, I was able to approach. And I will tell you, and one of the things that, we're trying to work on is that is very hard for, and honest, a big tough detective to want to talk about those things and not even want to, but just like feel comfortable, because that's not who really they're built to be. They're really built to be. They have an elite skill that when I talk about that a lot, and maybe not really know how either. And so we were free in our conversations, but I don't know how much he wanted to tell me before, because he, didn't want me to be frightened for him to leave anymore than I already was every single day. So it's that protection mode, which is, that's what law enforcement officers are built to do, protect. But then, like I said, in the conversations that we've had, that I'm like, some things you can't tell me, like those are things that will make me have nightmares for 2 weeks. I'm not built, like I said earlier, built that way. So in some ways, like before, yes, but he would protect me. And then, like I said, just didn't really know how, because that's not who he's supposed to be, or that's not his makeup. Not understanding that, like, you really got to protect that skill that you have by keeping your mental health, protected. What's the word I'm trying to say? But conditioned, that's the word. But even during and during, it's kind of the same thing. Is not to appear weak, during the grief, that the time that he did deal with it after losing our son, still could approach, but there still was the resistance.
Oftentimes when we're talking to spouses, we hear about this, almost like this invisible force field, that there's a sense that something is not okay, but we can't quite put our finger on it. And I think the same goes for first responders, is that they sense that something is off or not wrong, or that they're full, and they need to be able to decompress or recalibrate in some way. They can't quite put their finger on it. And that bothers people when they can't point to something tangible. For Jeff, of course, there was the loss of your son was the most tangible event to point to. I imagine that at other times in Jeff's career and in your marriage, there were moments where you could sense that there was a weight, or sense that there was something there.
Right.
Were there ways that you could break down walls, break down some of the defenses that Jeff made?
Well, to be honest with you, we had, and this is a story, but for you, but we had honestly, I was out of town when we found out about our son, but we had talked on the phone at 11 o'clock that night. And we had talked about just like that I could tell there were some things just, again, job related and things that I know that he had seen and dealt with in the job. And we had talked about, trying to find some outlets for him and that it's good for you. And he finally agreed. I really think, yeah, like I do think that some mental health outlets would be great. I said, we'll go together. I mean, just because with a counseling background, I'm all about that, for myself, for everybody. And so we had agreed to that. That was 11 o'clock that night. And then we found out at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so we just never got there. So it's
Right.
like, it's the tip of the iceberg that I wish we had gotten there, as I always say, because it would have been really nice to have a person who was already connected with to talk to right away. Some, skills and strategies already built in, maybe some other stuff already dealt with. Who knows if that would have helped, but who knows if it wouldn't have. So.
As with anything in our lives, we all, we always need a person, whether that person is a professional, whether that person is a family member, a trusted friend, advisor, mentor. But we want to have those relationships already set, because otherwise we're behind the 8 ball, that if we wait to figure out how to deal with anxiety or depression or whatever may be troubling us until that moment, then we have all that work to do. So establishing those relationships with, again, whomever it may be, is so essential to, as you said, to just have that in place. So when the call needs to be made at 3 a.m. of, hey, I need an ear, I need you to come just be with me, those relationships are there. And it's easy to say, okay, there are all these coworkers and all these peers around, just as we may have in our lives. It's very difficult to make that step, to make that call, to kind of essentially make yourself vulnerable to say, I'm stoic and I am professionally on point. I can do the job, and not but, and I am struggling with these things and I can't even put my finger on it. I think it's difficult for first responders who kind of grow up in that other family of stoicism, of strength, of perseverance, of all these, it's just that part of the camaraderie is that we've got this, we are lean in people. We are in the fight, to be able to step back and say, okay, now I need to take a knee. I need to drop my pack for a minute. I need to reset, recalibrate. I don't know what that looks like, but it doesn't mean I'm lesser than. It doesn't mean I'm incapable of handling that. We as spouses can say that all day long. It's just we're really battling a culture.
It is, yeah. And when I speak to new recruits and on that topic, I really try to relate it to, I say, like a professional athlete. And I'm like, they are not allowed to just show up on game days and play. Their bodies won't make it that way. They have to condition and they have to do all of these things to take care of their bodies before they're allowed to just play, or else they're going to like have a breakdown physically. And so that's why I say, like, yes, you are stoic, you are, but you're conditioning to stay that stoic person, and that law enforcement officer that you want to be is mental. And of course, some physical, but mental. And so, right, we have to change the culture to where you don't look at it where they don't look at it as, I'm not being stoic, I have to go get help, instead of going, this is part of the job and I want to stay this way. And so I need to stay conditioned, and I need to just make sure that I do what I need to do to keep the mental health where it needs to be able to be the best law enforcement officer I can be. So it is just like culturally, stop thinking, I mean, in other jobs too, just our world, people stop thinking that like all things can only go wrong and everything else in your body at some point in your time, but with your brain, that'll never happen. You know what I mean? And being okay with like, hey, guess what? This is the way I feel. And we, as the people that are listeners, practicing, okay, well, let's call the doctor. Like hey, that happens. It's all right. So
I like how you reframed it into conditioning, and absolutely the body needs to hold up so that we can do the job, that people can can, meet those wickets, make sure that they have that physical capability. But ultimately, if what's going on up here and what's going on inside of us as a human being, which is really why, first responders do the job that they do and why they feel compelled and feel passionate and sometimes almost even addicted to that life of service, that has to be checked as well. Is that if it's not so much a matter of help as if you can't do it on one's own, but that there needs to be naturally an unloading, or an
Right.
offloading of
Mhm.
information or of just emotionally laden events and experiences. For the same reason that line of duty personnel are very compassionate. That compassion is what can also create either scars or scar tissue.
Mhm.
And as we know,
Right.
scars are visible and but they don't have any functional impairment. They're simply a mark of a surface wound from the past, whereas scar tissue can actually trip us up. It can keep us from having not only just literal range of motion, but emotional range of motion. So a lot of times we see in military and for civilian first responders is that there's that constriction of emotion, that the range that used to be there isn't there anymore. So it's really dialed in into a much more narrow band, which is really difficult for family members because we can see that transition sometimes very starkly and immediately, and probably more often than not, it's just this gradual shift. But we may have the same emotional range, but now we find ourselves partnered with someone who is maybe even very dichotomous, more of a flip switch instead of a dimmer switch, which we need, for that person to roll up and down. But the job really may require just being, on the job in the moment requires that on off switch. That just doesn't, translate very well to family life.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about the issues that you faced in the early months in the first year after you lost your son and Jeff?
Is just well, the biggest thing is that you have no control over grief. And it doesn't matter what you try to do, all the things that you try to do, like you have to work with the grief, but work on the grief. Um, and so I mean, like your whole world changes. I mean, you said things that you thought and believed before, you start to question and wonder. And the whole sense of, I really don't have control is scary. And just the immense loss and just missing, that person, from my case, those people. Um, it's just really hard, but it's such a fog in the first year. You just are really pushing to get through it. And especially if you have kids that are left here, kids that are here with me still on earth and working through that and helping them understand. You're just really surprised when you do kind of come out of the fog a little bit, that wow, like I can't believe I made it through that. But I will say it does take, like I said, a lot of work working through the grief and turning to people and building a community and talking about it. And if you feel like you need to cry, you cry. It's not about holding stuff in again and being stoic. I mean, most of us are stoic in some way. Well, you don't want to just like cry your eyes out, in front of everybody,
Mhm.
but you have to feel those emotions and talk about them. And like for me, say, God got me through it, but it was from the people in the community that was placed before me. It wasn't a magic wand. It was work, and it was having someone to talk to. It was going and getting therapy. Um, my children, having therapy for them.
Mhm.
And the biggest thing is it's just so hard to go through each step of grief and not try to have control over that. It's so hard to lose control of your whole life and your beliefs that you had, and to gain them back. The biggest part is these people are not here with you turn to go through it. It's because they're gone that you're going through this, and the immense just missing them so much. But the huge need, like I said, to have a community and have people to talk to and to go through those feelings. And when you have stuff placed in front of you, like I said, it's not a magic wand. It's not going to just go away. To use those people, use your, like you were saying earlier, if it's your mom, if it's a therapist, if it's a preacher, kind of use them all. I mean, because sometimes one person isn't going to be available, so you build a community. And I don't know, so, and it's just still step by step. And there are some days that I still need that, and the days in between are longer now, but it's to always ask for help and just be honest.
Mhm.
And if like I used to say, like, if I would tear up at something, I go, sorry. Now, like, I don't say sorry anymore. Like, if it's just a little tear, I get teared up. It's okay. It's normal. Like that's like my body trying to just help me out here during this moment. But it's really difficult. But I can say, so when I go and I speak and I say, talk to people, get therapy, you have to reach out, build that community. I say, I'm not up here just lecturing. I'm speaking from experience. I had people in my family dealing with this that did not do that. And they suffered with the steps of grief much longer, much harder. I mean, you could see the difference. And if you did reach out and talk and work through that, and then if you just try to keep it inside.
Right. There's an old philosophical saying that grief is itself a medicine. And I think you told me a while back about the science of tears.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that real briefly?
So the science of tears, it talks about how, you can read research on this, about how they studied tears from like onions or just like happy tears, and then the different makeup of those tears from stress tears, which release a lot more cortisol. And that's another something else. If you look at the research on that and what that does to your brain, and it's released when you are stressed, it's released through stress, and how much damage it can do to your brain, mental health wise, or just other damages if you have too much of a buildup of it from stress. Well, in the science of tears, it was released through like crying, anguish, upsetting tears. There was a difference in their chemical makeup. So, after I read that, I'm just like, yeah, because I will tell you, there's times before all this of like a good cry. Like, I really felt better after a good cry. I'm like, well, when I read that Science of Tears, I'm like, that makes sense. It's releasing all that stuff that's being caught, that cortisol that's being trapped in my brain and making things really bad. So
Emotion is energy, right? So it wants to find its way out. When we're anxious, we bounce our knee, we pace, we move in an agitated way, and it's that energy just needing to get to the outside of us. When we're angry, we kick or throw or yell vehemently. That's that same emotion trying to get on the outside of us. It's not meant to be stuffed. It's just a natural
Oh.
hold. And when we do hold it in because maybe we're in the moment or we have to remain maybe professional or stoic, at some point, if it's not expressed, it festers and it turns into something unrecognizable, or we displace it onto someone else. So we take whatever is going on inside and throw it onto some unsuspecting person, like our child or our pet or our spouse. And it can get very confusing very quickly. Someone once said to me that sometimes the only way to gain control is to let go of it. And it was a very profound statement when I heard that. And for someone who likes to be in control of things, that was an undeniable truth. One that I had to chew on quite a few times. And I think when we're talking about grief, it is a process that must occur in some way, and everyone goes about that differently. I think that expressing, either if it's tearfulness or talking about someone, it is a form of love. It is a form of honor for that, for that person's existence and legacy. We just, unfortunately, just like with mental health, we are not comfortable with grief, and so we don't know how to welcome it. We don't know how to go through it. We try to go around it and over it
Mhm.
and deny it. And at the end of the day, it's a natural process that must be had. Um,
This is true.
are there things that you have relied on that you found in your journey since 2018 in particular that have been healing for you or helpful for you?
Um, yeah, like I said, the biggest thing is to not keep anything in, to just really ask for help, um, to talk about, I'm really having a bad day, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at this, because there were days I was just didn't, but for the most part, to ask for help, to have a really deep respect for mental health that I gained, because it's fragile. And unfortunately, I gained it through um, suicide, suicide coming into our lives. But just to have that deeper respect, to really really start to pay attention to um, how I was feeling, and to never say, "Oh, I'll never do that," because Jeff said I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he truly, like, I mean, most people probably don't ever think they would do that they would take their own lives. Um, and so, to, like I said, to just reach out to someone, to express how I was feeling, to have that greater respect for mental health, and just researching and reading to help me understand it more, which then helped me get through it and my children get through it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It sounds like I'm saying it over and over again, but just can't stress anymore that you have someone. It's got to be the right person. So if it doesn't work out the first time, find someone else that you can talk to and that can really help you with, because a lot of times too, you think, oh, I know what they're going to say and I know what to do. And then you go and you're like, no, I didn't try that
Mm-hmm.
strategy to help me get through this. To be open to, like I said, having that respect for mental health, and to be open to help from other people, like you're right, the right person, and to try the things that are recommended to you, and to stick to it, because
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to have to try it a lot of times. I don't know, 100. I can't even count how many times I tried it, and just kept talking about it, because it's not going to just, you know, be
Mm-hmm.
better the first time you try.
Right. Jeff's legacy and your legacy have had a really positive impact on St. Johns County Sheriff's Office with the call to stop stigma and advocate for speaking out, as you said. What other things would you tell spouses who are maybe going through a change in their first responder, or something that was similar to what Jeff has had gone through?
So I will say, looking back, when our son passed away, looking back at the outreach from the sheriff's office that I received, um, and then, Jeff's fear of being stoic, and saying, I've got it, don't worry about it, you don't have to reach out to them. And so I, in my own struggle, gave him more power to say that. And so, like I said, it's looking back now, I I would say to spouses, maybe not give them so much power, which it's hard, and I understand, like, if it's a spouse that's going through this with them, um, because of the fact that they are going to keep things in. Like, he sent a text message to me before he took his life, and he stated in it, "No one really knows how I feel." And probably so, because he just didn't feel comfortable in expressing that. And so I look back and go, I gave him too much power in deciding whether I should reach out for him. And because, like I said, in some ways you're like, I don't know, is this normal grief? Is this normal? I've never been through this before. I'm struggling. What do I do? But if I could look in hindsight back now and say, when maybe I saw the withdrawal, just thinking, instead of going, is that normal? Maybe going ahead and reaching out more and asking those questions, because if he, you get to a point where it gets so deep and he isn't saying anything, he doesn't, he may lose the power to come and say, I need help. I'm going through this. He's not thinking straight. So I would recommend that, just if you see, I don't know. would really recommend, if something like that happens, looking up, if you don't know them already, the signs, those are very important, um, to be able to help if you can. And like I said, I didn't really know. I thought it was very strange what's going on. I talked to some people, he's won't stay in the same room as us anymore, but thought that he just needed his time. But looking back, I think, and from the text, I think I wish I would have said, "Hey, this is what we're doing. Let's go, like, together. I feel like you really need this, and I'm going to reach out to people and say, hey, Jeff really needs this, and it's going to be okay."
Mhm.
Because all that really matters is that you're okay and still here.
Right, right.
But
One of the
a lot of times of course, and you don't, but you don't think that, like, now he's going to do this, you don't, but still, like, knowing what I know now, and if I can teach that to other people, is to really look for those signs and understand that, especially law enforcement, they don't want to reach out, and that sometimes they don't even realize how bad it is to reach out before it's just too late.
Mhm. All of the things that you're talking about are very central to what the First Responder Project aims to do, and in that we're an agency outside of agencies. We're an organization outside of departments, so that, and in large part, the reason that we started doing family forums, so that there's yet another resource that's available to family members, to normalize things, or to figure out, am I alone in this, or do I have a sisterhood or a spousehood of other individuals who can say, yes, I see that all the time, or that was something my spouse went through, and done so anonymously, and not having to, necessarily talk about, provide names, obviously, but just really have fellowship among family members. And I think it would be ideal to have something like that for kids as well. Kids
Yeah.
worry about things that we are completely unaware of.
Yes.
They feel silly about bringing their fears up, but they are very aware when they watch the news or when the phone rings, and they wonder, just like we do, if this, this call is the call, but they
Right.
don't necessarily articulate it. They have the same emotions that we do, but they don't have the lexicon or the vocabulary to be able to express it. So I think that we certainly need to reach out as well
Yeah,
for
yeah. And they have the fear. I can speak for my daughters, the fear of, oh, okay, if you want to talk about, for a kid, their whole life changing, like a really secure life, because they are, like, mentally where they are at that stage developmentally, and then to lose a parent, and then the fear of, oh my gosh, this other parent, not only will I lose this other parent that's here, but this other parent is not functioning like my parent is supposed to function. And they take on all of that and worry so much. I know my daughter's, like, tried to become my, it was like roles reversed almost, because they were so worried about, I can't lose this other parent. I got to make sure she's okay because this is not my parent. Um, and so, just talking about, like I said, a whole world being turned upside down for the kids, truly. So it is good that that's offered
Mhm.
for the
Are
whole.
there any other things that you'd like to see? Naturally, our listening audience today are supportive of first responders and their families, and hopefully being able to show that, support. What would you like to see the project do moving forward based on our conversation today?
And so, I've thought about that, and there's two things I definitely would like to see: more easily accessible resources for law enforcement, and people that understand the profession as a resource. And when I say a resource, for someone for them to go to and feel comfortable talking to, where they aren't going to be like, yeah, you don't understand our profession and what we really go through. And so I just feel like the more resources they have, something like that, for something like that, that the people that they can turn to would be very, very beneficial. And again, people who understand their profession. And support and resources to help change the culture. So there were some about mental health, with law enforcement. And I know, like, for St. Johns County, they have an outreach program that went into place, and they had already started really focusing on mental health for law enforcement officers for the sheriff's department. And then after what happened with Jeff, it, brought it to light even more, something that they did not want to happen. And so they built upon what they had started, and that's what I'm involved in as well. But for this first responders project to be able to help those programs that may already be in place, more resources for them, help build those that are, like I said, that those programs that are in place already in agencies, but just make them bigger, and more accessible, or to help start those type of programs, which is camaraderie within, within the departments, and therefore that change the culture again to where this is not about, oh, we'll go back to the stoic word, or weak. I'm not stoic. I'm weak. It's I have to ask for help. It's not about that. It's about, like, no, you just really got to stay conditioned, and that's what we believe here in this department, in the sheriff's office, or wherever we're talking about. Is it's just about you being able to stay at the level that you need to be at, and that law enforcement officer that you want to be, and change that culture. That this is helpful. This is not, you're not stoic. This is not a bad thing. This is a, we're going to keep you conditioned thing.
Right. This is
So I would like to see that, those two things.
So change the culture and teach the culture.
Yes, provide that education, that information, and those resources. As many resources as we possibly can would be fabulous.
Thank you so much for sharing your very personal story, which is tragic and as I said before, has a legacy for first responders and their families, for us to be able to learn how to do everything we can and put all of our resources into preventing suicides among first responders, for empowering family members to be able to reach out and get help for themselves, for the stress that they go through, as well as to look out and be the sheepdog for their sheepdog. So
Right.
Greatly appreciate you spending time with us. Looking forward to working with you in the future. And of course, stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it very much.
Take care. Thank you again to Kristen for your story and for letting our listening audience understand the tribulations of having to be a surviving family member of a suicide. We are going in just a moment to hear from Sergeant Andy Scott from Clay County Sheriff's Office. And we're also going to have a live interview with Chief Carlos Aviles from the St. Johns County Fire Rescue Department.
That's the city of St. Augustine.
Excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. And then we'll have one more pre-recorded interview out of Clay County. And we're going to be taking a break this afternoon before coming back at 6:30 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. We're going to have a series of 4 to 5 live interviews with more first responders, and we hope that you can join us then. We'd like to remind everyone that this is National First Responder Day, and we would greatly appreciate the community considering providing support for First Responder Project. Our aim, again, is to provide education, training, and outreach to first responders, departments, agencies, family members, and mental health providers. We are invested in providing opportunities for peer connection and support, as well as recalibration retreats for first responders and their support people. We are also interested in, from our community, to show their support through in-kind donations, whether that be providing facilities, food for our events, supplies, or volunteers. We are interested in grant writers, folks who can help us out to procure grants, so that all of our programming is provided at no cost to first responders and their families. That can come from individuals, from businesses, from corporations. We welcome that, and we look forward to kickstarting our 2021 opportunities. And without further ado, we're going to have one other interview queued up, and then we'll follow with our live interview. Good morning, Sergeant Scott. Thank you for being here as part of this fundraiser today.
It's my pleasure.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about your background?
Well, my name is Andrew Scott. I'm a sergeant for the Clay County Sheriff's Office. I've been a law enforcement officer for 27 years. I did 9 years in the state of Maine, and then moved to Florida, and I've been here at the Clay County Sheriff's Office for the remainder. I'm presently the team leader of the Crisis Intervention Stress Management team, as well as a few other teams. But I believe heavily in this type of environment to try to keep our officers mentally healthy.
Welcome today. Can you tell me a little bit about why you think first responders of all various lines of duty don't often talk about the stress and strain of their job?
Mostly because people don't understand what we go through. From what I could tell over the last 27 years, it's that you go home to talk about it, people don't understand what you're talking about, or they don't think it's as bad as what you say, and then they kind of discount you. So after being discounted for a period of time, you just stop talking about it. And then even among your community, people won't understand because they have a different feeling to what you've done or what you've gone through, and they've been through the same thing, and they discount how you feel. So after a while, it gets so that people just stop talking about it.
And I imagine most first responders aren't eagerly skipping into therapist's office.
From what I could tell, as the team leader here, if I don't reach out to them, they won't call. And I get a lot of, hey, I'm right here, I'm checking, making sure you're okay. And a lot of my people will still not reach out knowing that I'm available to talk to them, or that I could refer them to a therapist. They still, it's almost like pulling teeth sometimes to get them to understand it. It takes me on average 2 to 3 visits with them before they are willing to even start talking about it.
Is there a sense that there needs to be more training in the community among mental health providers to better understand the needs of first responders?
And I would like to see it so they understand what we do as first responders. So instead of getting like, well, for instance, we just had a debrief recently with some people at the sheriff's office, and one of the persons that helped us halfway through, they started like trying to ask us questions to elicit responses, but it felt like they were talking to a 2-year-old. And I understand that that's valid in some aspects, but in the first responder aspect, I felt that it caused a lot of problems. And so offline, I made a quick phone call to say, hey, let's try to fix this and talk to these people like, wow, you've been there, done that type of thing, instead of I'm a 2-year-old and I need you to hold my hand as I walk through it. So I would like to see more buy-in from our community instead of us being so closed-minded, but to open it up, but also to get everybody together so that we could all heal. So people understand us and we understand them.
We're sorry to hear that's the case. I think our military also experiences that in large extent in terms of finding providers who are culturally competent. So that's one of the things that First Responder Project is aiming to do, is to provide some thin line training, so to speak, to providers who are invested in working with law enforcement, fire rescue, Department of Corrections officers, EMTs, so forth. Can you tell me a little bit about why you think first responder mental health or mental wellness is important?
Well, first and foremost, if you do not get it, you start going down this negative alleyway, and then you stay negative. And so without the help, you go to work, and even though your event maybe happened a couple weeks ago, something will trigger it at work, and then you start having the same type of event over and over, and then you get burnout. So I firmly believe that if we don't get the help, it causes more burnout, especially in the law enforcement profession. And then you get a negative officer who only thinks negative, like the bad guys are wrong, the victim is telling a lie, the traffic violator has not done has done what they say they didn't do. So I firmly believe that if you're not able to release the emotional pressure, that it just continues to build and build and build. And then you find guys and ladies that have gone on or retired, and then you see them, they still stay negative. So you'll see them 4 years later, and they'll talk about an event that happened 15 years ago, just like it was yesterday.
There tends to be this skewing to one side when there's a lot of exposure to inhumanity or injustice or people behaving badly,
Right.
that there's just a natural tendency to default to that negative. So there needs
Sure.
to be that balancing effect.
Right. I think that if we were able to spend more time helping first responders, they might be able to understand it and move forward and still have a positive outlook instead of after a while just.
As we know, the suicide rate is very high, tragically high among first responders, both in the line of duty and afterward in the first few years of retirement.
Yeah.
Also something that we're hoping to provide resources for in terms of that transition from line of duty work into retirement. It's a bit of downshifting from fifth to first gear, and there's going to be a lurch effect. So we want to make sure we help people with that.
I notice a lot of them have lost their identity. And in particular, I could think about this one person who retired. He was a high-ranking member here at the sheriff's office. He left here. He was gone for less than a year, and he's actually reserved someplace else just to have the identity. And so we went from a high-ranking person on command staff to now a reserve police officer, just to continue to have that identity of carrying the badge and being the police officer, instead of transitioning into civilian life where you don't have the daily trauma or the issues that happen on a day-to-day basis.
The most common fear that I hear military and civilian first responders say is that they worry about losing their purpose, losing their mission, losing their focus and their direction, having somewhere to be, but more importantly, being able to satisfy that need to provide service to others. So finding that purpose afterward, I think, is really, really essential.
I noticed a lot of our people that are getting ready to retire, there's a plan for the money, but there's no plan for their mind. They're just leaving. And then you go from 100 miles an hour to 34 miles an hour, and then what happens?
Can you tell me any of your, speak from any firsthand experiences that have shown you the importance of or helped you appreciate the psychological and emotional impact of the job?
I could think of something that happened to me in Portland, Maine. I was working, it was wintertime. There was snow on the ground, and I got a phone call, or I got a call for service saying that there was a car accident where people had gone off or interstate and had flipped and had fallen, and that we needed to get there. So I remember going down the interstate, looking and seeing the tracks, and then they went over an embankment, and I looked over the embankment, and the car had fallen 40 feet onto the ground, and it was laying on its roof. So I went around to the side street and pulled in, and was the first person to the call. And there was one guy that was screaming and hollering, and three people that were completely silent. And as the fire rescue got there, we were able to extract everybody from the car. There was three kids that were dead, all under the age of 18. And then the driver, who was intoxicated, he was 19. And that particular day in Portland, Maine, I was also on the crisis intervention team. So I did, because I was a senior officer, I did all three death notifications. And seeing the different reactions to the fact that their child was not going to come home really impacted me. And I remember that afternoon, after going home and hugging my children and kind of processing it, I made contact with our team leader for crisis intervention. And we spent quite a bit of time that night talking about different events. And I feel like if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have felt the same way about it. It was a very negative event. I can tell you that the thing that stands out, and this happened 23 years ago, and it's just like yesterday that it happened to me. But in one particular case, I was walking by a window in Maine. You have the houses are 2 stories, so I was able to look into the first floor window, and a woman was ironing her uniform to go to work. Looked like she had like a nurse outfit on, and the husband was sitting at the table, and it ended up knowing him from my past. So I knocked on the door. He came to the door. I asked him if they wanted to sit down. He wanted to sit down. The wife was very adamant about not wanting to sit down. And when I told them that their daughter had been killed in a car accident, wasn't coming home. I distinctly remember her pushing him in the chest and telling him that it was her fault that the daughter died because he was the easy parent and the daughter had called and asked to stay out 2 extra hours and he had allowed it. And that just was really impacting me, probably because I knew the person and that I knew the family and that, I thought, wow, that's going to be really rough losing your child. But then knowing that that man for the rest of his life is going to have to think if I didn't let my daughter stay out 2 extra hours, she'd probably be coming home right now. But that kind of morphed me into really wanting to be doing more crisis intervention for the first responders because I felt that it really helped me and was able to, for me to keep going forward and still with dealing with all the trauma that we see, it still gave me an idea of, okay, I could do this, I could do this. And I firmly believe in it. I try to do it as much as I can here at the sheriff's office. Uh, I think that it's very, very good, especially in our line of work, to be able to get it off your chest, to understand that I'm not the person having the same, I am the person having the same feelings as everybody else. And that, together we could talk about it and heal so that we can stay positive.
I think a lot of people assume that, if I just stuff it, if I just suppress it long enough, it's just going to dissipate and it's not going to bother me. And it's the nature of the beast in a first responder job to, to have cumulative trauma and exposure to threat or tragedy. And we all want to believe that it's just going to lay low, that let sleeping dogs lie, brushing under the rug. But as I'm sure you've experienced, it can not only in the moment lead to sleepless nights and a change in mood, but over time, after different exposures or triggers that, bring up old memories, it can wake a sleeping giant.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about what you think the community can do to support first responders, whether it be law enforcement, fire rescue, corrections officers, medical professionals, public safety, trauma,
I think the thing
EMTs.
the community can do is just maybe try to understand that we're the people that they call. I mean, they people get themselves to a position and they don't call us because they're having a great day. They call us because whether they have a criminal thing or if there's some crime being committed against them or they're having a health problem, we're not being called when they're having, a party. So we're there to solve the problem. And that if maybe they understood that we are the last line of defense, but the first line that a lot of people will call, that maybe there's a lot to learn about what we have to do and that we have certain things in place. Like for instance, if they say, if they see somebody like maybe being handcuffed and put on the ground and they disagree with it, maybe they just understand that I'm just trying to keep myself and all my coworkers safe and that it's just a short period of time before the next thing happens. So I would love to see them take more of an active role into learning what we do and then in return us take an active role in teaching the community more about, if this happens, we're going to do this. If that happens, we're going to do that. Just like, if you're dehydrated when the fire rescue shows up, they're going to give you an IV, something along those lines. I think that would help us to be able to better understand people.
What are ways in which the community can gain some of that education?
Well, we actually do a Citizens Academy here at the sheriff's office. Every it's two times a year, and then I forgive me, I don't know the number of weeks that it is, but in the fall and the spring they do a Citizens Academy, and they could come and then they go through the whole genre of everything. They go to dispatch, they go to the jail, they come to the road, they come to training, they learn what we do for firearms. They'll do a quick workout when it comes to defensive tactics. They just have an idea. And then we put them through scenarios. We'll do the FATS machine and then the Milo machine where they have a shoot, don't shoot type things. And it's very eye-opening. And a lot of people will leave and think, wow, I didn't realize that they actually have to make those types of decisions and they only have 0.3 seconds to decide they're going to do something or not do something.
It really gives that visceral feel of what it's like to have a day on the job.
Yep.
Is that something that is at cost to the civilian?
No cost. It's free. They show up. The only cost is time. They have to do time. That's all.
Mhm.
But no cost to them. It's all funded by us.
And is that specifically with Clay County Sheriff's Office, or does that happen in other
I don't-
counties?
I can't speak on any other county. I just know that we do it here at Clay County.
Okay, wonderful. Do people have to be residents of Clay County to participate?
I'm not sure. I think
Okay.
so, but I would have to check on that one. I'm not
But
sure.
they could certainly call and find out.
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. We'll see if we can get our clinicians who we train to go through that as well. How do you think the nonprofit First Responder Project can best meet the needs of first responders going forward?
By having some funds there so that it gets more into the minds of people like the sheriff, the undersheriff, people like that, that as we go forward, it gets in their minds that there's funds out there that would allow people to go to train so that we could help our people.
What type of postvention maybe when people are either after an event, after a traumatic event, or after a career's worth of exposure, what types of interventions do you think could be beneficial that we could provide from our nonprofit through funds raised in this fundraiser?
I would like to see some real world practice when it comes to debriefings and diffusings to allow us to know that what we're doing is successful and correct, but also give us a chance to, as the people that are helping heal, give us a chance to go through it ourselves so that we could learn better from people that, you know, that's your day-to-day profession. And I could be honest and say that we don't do a lot with the retired folks. Once they're retired, it's kind of just they're retired. We haven't done a lot of, you know, unless you have a friend that's still in the business that'll call and check on you. We personally, besides doing like a financial workshop, we don't do a lot of mental workshops. So that would actually be something that I wouldn't mind seeing to help our people as they retire, stay healthy and move on from this.
What words would you have for your peers, since you're very involved in peer support and the critical incident stress management? What words of advice or encouragement would you have for your peers to avail themselves of resources for,
My
particularly
words
for
of
their mental wellness?
my words of advice would just be to reach out, because just by the sheer fact of reaching out and asking those a question, and you might not be practiced on it, and you might not be schooled on it, but just for the fact that you're asking, it makes people feel wanted, makes them understand that they're not alone, that there's other people out there that do care and that want to check on them and make sure that they're well. And then if you do it over and over again, you get practice at it. So it's easier for you to call and ask the question. And it's not so hard for you to sit there on your couch and be like, I really want to call, but I don't want to bug them.
Mhm.
You know,
There's this idea, I think, when people are in a line of duty and they are there to be a first responder, that they do not want to be responded to. They don't want to be asking for help and reaching out and needing a response. But we all know that it's an inherent part of the job, that there's going to be exposure to things that just hurt the heart and soul.
Mhm.
And weigh on and prey on people at times.
Mhm.
So we hope that people hearing you today and people listening to some of the other interviews will not only gain awareness, but your peers will start to reach out to the programs that we would like to offer through First Responder Project, and also to ensure that our community supports those who provide public safety and service every day. We greatly appreciate you talking with us today. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Please stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Well, good afternoon. It's after the noon hour, and the morning's been flying by, but I am very pleased and honored to present our fire representative for the day, fellow Army veteran, and very proud to know this man as a friend and just a big fan. Chief Carlos Avalos is our St. Augustine City Fire Chief, and it's just a pleasure to have you here, Carlos, and happy First Responder Day. We are. It's just really been a pleasure getting to know you and your folks, and the admiration that we have for our fire and EMS folks. What do you call? You call 911 and they come with an engine or a ladder, and rescue comes, and they've got such competent medics on board, and the care and concern. So I will stop gushing, but Tracy, do you have anything to add?
I'm just thrilled that you're here representing fire rescue. We have a whole host of questions lined up for
All
you,
right,
but
great. Well, I appreciate being here, and I appreciate the invite to be here, and I appreciate the work that you guys are doing. Really around the clock to take care of first responders. So it's my honor to be here.
thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
So, Chief, could you tell us a little bit about, for our listening audience who may not know a lot about a day in the life of fire rescue, what types of exposures your folks, you have had that may not be easily recognizable to the general public, other than what they might see, the truck flying by or something that they see, kind of represented on television?
So, I don't think that there are typical days, which is the best part of, I think, the fire service. When we talk to folks that are getting into this industry for the very first time, that's definitely one of the things that they harp on. That all of them will tell you, and I love this, I think it's universal across the board. Why did you get into this profession? 99% of them will tell you it's to help people, which is awesome. So sometimes I need to be reminded of that, because the careers have ups and downs. And then one of the other things that we hear all the time is that every day is a little bit different, and that no two shifts are often alike. And so things that folks may not know. All right, so we do 24-hour shifts. Most departments in this part of the state work a 24-48. So 24 hours on, 48 hours off. We live at the fire station for a third of the year. Most of us do. So you will, and that's why we call it a firehouse. I mean, the firehouse is that. It is a home. It has everything that you would have at your house: laundry, showers, living room, kitchen, sleeping quarters. Mm-hmm. So, but the shifts are long. Most folks think that we get there, check the trucks, and then sit around and wait for calls to come in. That's very, very seldom the case. Every day is very much structured. There is an immense amount of training that we have to comply to on an annual basis, which means that we devote a significant portion of our shift time to training. Mm-hmm. There's physical fitness that has to happen during the shift, and then there's all of the other. Every station has to get cleaned every morning. The trucks have to be checked, cleaned. All the equipment has to be run. Everything's got to be looking, tip top from top to bottom. And so, during the week, there's countless other details that we're asking them to do: appearances, places that we have to go, things that come up short notice, shuffling equipment around, shuffling trucks around. And then in between all of that, we're running, I think on average, most folks are probably doing anywhere between 8 to 15 calls a day. They're busy. Mm-hmm. In a 24-hour period. It's a lot. So, but I think one of the things that maybe folks would not be familiar with, I would say it is the wide mission scope. Mm-hmm. That would probably be one of the things. So when you think of the fire department, I think most people are thinking that it's fire stuff, and we do a lot of EMS. So about 80% of what we run is EMS related. Mm-hmm. So, but there are so many things that we have to be prepared for. So when I try to explain this to folks that come and do station tours, or I do speaking engagements with them, I tell them, I said, so you have to think of a fire truck as a rolling community toolbox. Everything that you need to mitigate disaster within your town is probably carried on this, $500,000 piece of equipment. And inside of that truck are anywhere between 3 or 4 very highly skilled operators that it's their job to use the equipment to mitigate what that disaster would be. So it could be fire related, could be EMS related. It could be an auto accident that would require extrication, jaws of life. It could be a confined space rescue. It could be a water related rescue. It could be an electrical thing. It could be a hazardous materials, which could be anything from a fuel spill to some sort of radioactive material to a gas leak, like a propane or natural gas leak. And so you're going to do all of these things potentially within a 24-hour shift. And so you have to be very agile and flexible, and to be able to maintain training standards on all of that stuff is an enormous challenge. And so one of the things that we tell folks is like, when you call 911, the public expects you to handle that call perfectly, exactly 100% of the time. So anything that they see that they don't think goes right, we open ourselves up to criticism, and that comes with the territory. I mean, but day in and day out, we have a tremendous group of very dedicated professionals that really do a very wide scope. And we've seen this has been an industry trend as new threats emerge, and people and a community looks to who do we task this problem to. Most of the time it ends up being the fire department. So case in point, South Florida, huge invasive species problem, right? Everglades are overrun with invasive species and non-native, like venomous snakes. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue has a venom task force, a team. It is a fully staffed team that does nothing but respond to issues of weird reptiles, snakes, venomous things, and they keep a bank with all these files and antidotes. And here's the problem. This is a problem down in South Florida. Who do they give it to? It ends up being the fire department that picks up that task. So you have to be very, very agile. And so in my position as a chief, you look at, all right, what are we looking at right now? How well poised is the fire department to handle the community's needs and assessments right this second? And then how do we work through policy and budgetary processes to look forward at industry trends? Because you have to be proactive and think, what is the fire service going to need a few years from now, right? 10 years ago, if you told somebody that every fire truck would have to carry ballistic protection and that there would be a national standard for carrying body armor on fire apparatus, they would have told you were nuts. Right? But every one of our trucks has body armor, for every seat in the rig. So it's that sort of kind of forward thinking. So whatever the fire service is now, it won't be that in the future.
I imagine pandemic was one of those
Yeah.
unforeseen
Yes.
circumstances.
More recently, yes,
bet
the
you
pandemic
someone
would be a
told you
very great
the whole
example of
country
that.
would
Mhm.
shut down.
And it's so funny. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they asked, we were specifically discussing the pandemic and how it's altered the fire service. And for whatever reason, I had this flashback of applying so I'm very young to do what I do. And that was clearly a concern when I was going through the interview and selection process to become the fire chief. I got asked point blank, like, all right, if we give you this position, you're going to be there for a very long time. How do you think you would tackle complacency? Like, how do you fight being complacent and not moving the needle in the right direction over the space? Not a problem. I actually talked to the city manager about that not long ago. I was like, remember that question? Like, this is not a concern to me. I have been thrown more stuff in the last few years but it's, you know, it's all very character building. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow and learn. So
Better busy than bored.
yes,
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
so. There's no no shortage
Mm-hmm.
of new challenges that we're thrown at every day.
Chief, can you talk a little bit about our audience probably knows a little bit or can imagine what some of the physical dangers are. Very different maybe than other first responder occupations. Can you talk a little bit about the physical dangers and then also about some of the psychological and emotional exposure that can essentially have a wear and tear effect?
So yes, I mean, so it could be a very emotionally demanding career profession. You know, if this is something that you choose to do, and historically, the fire service has been, you know, I guess it's just perceived as we're ultra tough and we're just, you know, expected to perform at the super high level all the time. You know, which we do. We do that. We perform at a high level all the time. But there's so many things that we're learning about this job that is just so bad for us. One of which is the long-term effects of lack of sleep and how challenging it could be to wake up 3 or 4 times in a 24-hour period, you know, especially and then to go from a dead sleep to an absolute adrenaline jump of I was in a deep REM and all of a sudden you know, the lights are on and I'm being told I need to move 100 miles an hour. You know, it takes a while, but when that adrenaline dumps, you know, those spikes in adrenaline are really bad for you. There's the physical aspects of it, and then on the mental side of things, I think one of the things that we struggle with is lack of closure. All right, so we show up, we put everything that we have into this incident, and one of two things is going to happen. We use all of our training, experience, and equipment and knowledge, and we fix what's wrong with somebody, or we follow the exact same process. We do everything 100% right, and we don't get the outcome that we were hoping for. And I think that is the most challenging part, that you could look at the situation and just go, you know, I sprinted to the truck. We didn't hit any traffic on the way here. You know, we got the IV on the first shot. We were able to defibrillate them early, like by the book. Everything went exactly as it should have, but you still don't get the outcome that you were hoping for. Or you do all of this and might never know what the outcome was, which is also a very difficult part of it. We transfer care, or, you know, if it's trauma and it's really bad and we're flying somebody to a regional trauma center, and so here, like if they would go to Orange Park or they would go to Jacksonville, once you transfer that care, the likelihood of you really getting that follow-up and finding out what happened to that person is slim to none. You'd really have to put the effort into it, and then even then, you know, with HIPAA and other laws, you may not know. And so I think that's a very challenging part of it. And then just not being able to process things. You know, it's not uncommon for us to run from one emergency to the next, to the next, to the next. I mean, we've had several days where I've seen crews pick up a call at 9:30 in the morning and not make it back to the station until 2 in the afternoon. Like it's just that busy. And so if you're dealing with something traumatic or an incident that really, for whatever reason, hits you, you might work on 4 other people before you get a chance to sit down and process what that was or what the outcome of that scenario was. And so I think that could be a challenge as well. I mean, and then I could talk forever about cancer.
Can you say something about that? I don't know that.
So I'm very
everyone-
passionate about this. So I'm very passionate about the mental health aspect of this. And I mean, because I've dealt with it personally. You know, I've had mental health crises, and but I've also had cancer. So I mean, I was 28, I think 28 or 29, and I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And I remember I thought it was from being overseas. I really did, because so I was in Iraq at the start of the ground war, and so I was around tons of burning tanks and trash piles and a lot of stuff that we would have used depleted uranium rounds on. And so I thought maybe that was it, but there was a pretty good gap in time there between potential exposure and the diagnosis. I'll never really know. Anyway, but I remember going through and scouring the internet, trying to find information on thyroid cancer, which is what I had, and just not finding a whole lot. I stumbled upon one article out of Las Vegas, and at the time, the Las Vegas Firefighters Union were in the process of trying to conduct studies because they had about a third of their department come down with thyroid cancer. And all this was at the time was a hypothesis. Like, we think this is work related. So the thyroid is a surface gland, very close to the surface of the skin. And when we fight fire, we're in there, we're in all of this really bad stuff that's in smoke that we didn't know then, but we know now. And so when you're done, then you go back in there, because then you have to do the overhaul. So firefighting is like 5 or 10 minutes of like just heart pounding, adrenaline, working your butt off, and then it's like hours and hours of work on the back end. Because once the fire's out, we have to look for hidden fire. We have to put out all the hot spots. That may require pulling ceiling down. That may require opening and exposing walls. And we used to not wear air packs when we did that because the fire was out. We would run a fan, but you could be in there and know it still smells really burnt. It's still hot in here. And so a lot of that stuff is still off gassing. Well, we would take all of our stuff off and then just leave the Nomex hood draped around the neck. And you still see that. And so, I mean, that was, I don't know, 10 years ago, give or take. Couldn't find anything. That article was a hypothesis. Now, the amount of information that's out there is astonishing. So, on average, about 2/3 of firefighters will develop some form of cancer during their career. And a lot of it has to do from the fact that the materials that are burning are different. So if you went into a typical house fire, most of the furniture was made of wood using, cotton or other organic materials for stuffing, and now everything's plastic. Everything has some sort of polymer or is hydrocarbon based. And so firefighters that used to fight a long time ago will tell you that the smoke smells different and looks different. And it's because it is. The materials that are burning in a home are burning, A, hotter, B, producing much more toxic fumes than we ever anticipated before. And so the state of Florida, 2 years ago, finally passed legislation that covered 21 specific types of cancer that are now covered under workman's comp that we would not have had access to before.
It's interesting that it's just kind of like, I imagine it's always in the back of your mind that it's this kind of silent, deadly
Right.
Exposure that you have on top of the acute exposure of being in a, fighting a fire, and then potentially having to recover people versus rescue people,
Right.
and the tragedy that's inherent in that.
Yeah, it's a lot. Sorry, because I felt like I covered a mountain of stuff there in a few minutes, but
Well, I mean, that speaks to the layered aspects of exposure, both physical and mental. What type of impact is there on the family of a first responder?
so a lot. It's very difficult to fully understand or explain things. I think I go back to the whole lack of sleep thing. So I'm not on shift anymore, right, as a chief. I will tell you that the single greatest benefit probably of moving into administration is coming off of shift work. Didn't realize how bad that was for me until I got into a steady sleep pattern. So no, I mean, if you had a difficult call, or you just had one of those nights where, "Look, I got up 3 times to help the same person move from the bed to the bathroom and back," because that happens sometimes. You may have been up for 20 of the 24 hours and had really, really bad sleep in between and not had any trauma. Just that. I think getting home, being short with family members, them asking you what's wrong, you not wanting to go into detail. So I think that there's those stressors. I think 80 or 90% of my firefighters do something on the side on their 2 days off. And so a lot of them are moving from that environment straight into teaching or straight into lawn care or some other type of job doing who knows what.
To supplement income.
To supplement
Yep.
income, because they, I get it. And so, I was guilty of that for a long time where I was just it was avoidance. I went, 6 or 7 years straight working like 4 jobs. So I was full time at the fire department. I was doing my Army Reserve stuff. I was working down at the Speedway in Daytona during the month on a crash truck. And then I was teaching at the fire academy for, maybe let's say 5 days a month, just nonstop. I maybe had a day off every 5 or 6 days. And it was just me feeling like I was invincible and running forever, not fully realizing how many other things I was neglecting in that process. And a lot of that, was family related.
It's a common phenomenon for military and civilian first responders to push to stay active. An
Yeah.
idle mind
Yeah, we don't want
can
idle
be-
minds.
can be a very
No.
dangerous thing, right? Idle
Right.
hands, idle mind. Because I think when we slow down, I use the metaphor of it's like if you had your truck and you had a boat, you're not going to tow it with a rope because every time you stop, the only thing you can do is roll through stop signs because the minute you stop the truck, the boat's going to
Right.
slam into you. So I think that's part of the reason that we just move all the time, right? If we know we have any of us who have things kind of chasing us
Right.
in a way, and
Yeah, because you don't know how many of those things are going to catch you if you stop.
That's right.
Maybe that's how I felt, right? Like, now I'm just going to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, and
more afraid of, I think, what the stop would actually be like, So,
And, I know that you're married and have a fairly young family. Was there a avoidance of going home? It's more fun with the guys.
yeah, I guess so. Years ago, not now. But yes, I would say that. So all that chaotic stuff that I mentioned to you, I there's plenty of them that I see. I think for a lot of them, going on a 24-hour shift, doing all of that crazy stuff is somehow less stressful than being at home. I see that all the time. And then the only other added component to kind of looping back around to some of that family stuff is the schedule is difficult, especially around the holidays, and to get folks to understand that there's only so many people that can be off. And so, we're a small agency and we try to work around that as best we can and be fair and equitable about how we distribute that time. And then we're always very cognizant of wanting the families to come by the station and partake in that on holidays or anytime, honestly. But I have a shift like B shift. That's just that. It's just the short end of the stick for those guys. They will end up working because of how leap year works and because of how the schedule is what it is. That shift will end up working, I think it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, like 3 out of 4 years in a row. And so that's not fun. Missing Christmas morning, Thanksgivings, as much as you want to try to figure it out, it sucks.
Predictably unpredictable.
Right.
Yeah. So first responder families know what it's like to be flexible and know what it's like to be disappointed and worried
Yep.
And there's a lot of growth and strength that can come out of that, because they learn how to be resilient because they have to be.
Yeah.
But a lot of trial and tribulations in that process. Can you, having walked this walk for a long time and now serving as a chief, can you speak a little bit about the hindrances or reasons that first responders, particularly in fire rescue, may not want to address their mental health needs?
So I think really kind of tying back to what we said a little while ago, I don't know that some of them know that they need it. I think that they're still rolling ahead, just more afraid of the actual stop and what that impact could look like than anything else. But I think it's, and some of it's stigma, which I mean, I understand. But taking everything that I just mentioned into account, let's say you wanted to take some time off to decompress and you wanted to go see somebody. Well, for some of these guys and gals, then now you're talking about, well, then I have to miss a full day of work on this extra job, or I have to take time off of work to do it, and there's going to be out of pocket expenses. And so what ends up happening is that there's a million reasons not to address it. Right? Like, well, I'm supposed to watch the kid this day. Now I have to line up childcare, and I'm missing work on this extra duty. And so we have tried to eliminate as many of those barriers as we can. We do a lot to educate them on services that are available to them, how to access them. We can give them time off to go do that stuff. And if it's easier for them to go get those services on duty and it doesn't impact the, operational workforce in terms of like our ability to respond to emergency, then we do that. So, but like I said, I mean, I think it's all of those things. I do think stigma plays a large role in it, that we're just expected to pick up the pieces, put the truck back together, and then instantly turn around and be 100% prepared to respond to the next emergency.
Well, I think one of the themes that has emerged through this morning and into the afternoon segment is that leadership, such as yourself, Chief, and Chief, soon to be Sheriff Hardwick, and Commander Bieber, that it's the senior leadership that's out there in front and saying, look, I've had some struggles and I've sought care, assistance. And I think that message filters down into your organizations. And leading by example, I think, has really been, and I'm very much an admirer of the messages that we've been hearing today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to go through a mental health crisis to know that, but I think that, so as an administrator, my responsibilities are to the community and to the workforce, right? That if the workforce isn't healthy, they can't take care of the city. So for me, again, it's a super simple mindset. I will take care of you. You can take care of the city. There is a tremendous amount of personal responsibility on their part to understand, and in that, as leaders, we need to convey to them that it's okay to not be okay, right? Hey, like, we all go through this. And the same way that, if you tear an ACL or a rotator cuff, that you may need to go see an expert to get brought back up to be 100% so that you're the most effective you that you could be the second you step off of that truck, that this is no different. You're going to invest, an hour every shift into intense physical training to make sure that your body is 100% ready to go. And that if you're not making an effort to be mentally fit as well as physically fit, that, it may all be for naught.
We heard in an earlier interview with Kristen Carroll about she's really pushing the message of conditioning, that you're expected to perform at this elite level, and there's all of this preventive maintenance happening with your equipment when the most important piece of equipment is the individual.
Yeah,
In the
100%.
military,
It's
we
the
probably
operator,
called it,
right?
you know, the human capital.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be maintained proactively and reactively.
Right.
Because if we, you know, in terms of humanity 101 or human being 101, if there are different ways to exist and be in a space, and one is to be reactive and one is to be responsive.
Mm-hmm.
And so as professionals, you're expected to respond and be measured and calm, and, you know, and everything goes very, very smoothly. And there are times when we react and we're impulsive, and, you know, and we're not all kind of put together. And usually that reveals itself outside of work, because we keep it together
Right.
when we have the uniform on, and then if it's off,
So, you know, because we're in the public eye, it is difficult, because like I said earlier, I think that there's this expectation that, like, you're going to perform 100% and be absolutely flawless and perfect every single time. You know, I mean, we're all human. You know, we're all bound to have a bad day. We all make mistakes, and so, I mean, I think it's just, you have to be cognizant of your surroundings and your own individual positions on things. But I do think that is a very, just that itself, I think, is very, very taxing and weighing. Right. So, I mean, I think one of the most rewarding parts of the job is you showing up to, you know, say Mrs. Smith's house, right, when she's frantic and in an absolute panic about whatever has happened to a family member or what is happening to her property. And as soon as she sees that truck rolling around the corner with the lights on, it's probably the first time since that whole thing happened that she just breathes and says, "Oh, thank God they're here," right? Because this is the first step toward, you know, you can hear the sirens coming a mile away. It's like, all right, they're coming. I can hear them. You know, help is on the way. And seeing that physical transformation on somebody's face as soon as you get there and you start, you know, all that training kicks in, all this equipment's being brought out, you know, that it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, that when you call the phone, that I promise you, you're going to get more than $1 million worth of equipment and resources delivered to your house within 4.5 minutes, and they're going to perform at an exceptionally high level. Right? I think that the fire service is one of the greatest, you know, services that government offers, and I won't, and police, because I can't, you know, I mean, but but I think that pressure to constantly operate at that level under extremely difficult circumstances. So I can give you a really, I'll give you a great, I don't want to tell too many stories, but I will give you one, because I think it kind of touches to this and this need to really just be flexible. So it's been years ago. We got called to a house fire. We're 100% in firefighting mode. I've got tons of people coming. You know, I'm the incident commander, so I'm up front directing folks. Crews are going in. We sent crews in to do a search. We sent crews in to fight the fire. Fire gets knocked down. There's no visibility. We're setting up for ventilation. We're doing all of these things, but we're 100% in firefighting mode. And, you know, all of my attention is just focused on this incident, and I feel like we're crushing it. Like, I mean, by the book, everything is just boom, 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 boom. And then the search crew calls on the radio and says, "Hey, we have a body in the back room. We're bringing it out the front door." And my heart just like sinks. And I look around, everyone's in fire stuff. Okay. And we did have medical, well, I mean, we're all cross-trained. But instantly now we're fighting a fire and a traumatic injury, unresponsive person. We're working this full cardiac arrest that in and by itself we would have an engine dispatched to, an ALS unit, and a chief. So I was on the cusp of assigning everybody these different tasks because I needed to get them done, and boom, like one radio traffic transmission, my entire priority order is thrown out the window. My plan's completely thrown out the window, and now it's 100%, you know. So we're working this person on scene and dealing with this, and it's just like, and I had to like, you need to take charge of, like, I had to delegate it out. Like, I can't divide myself and do a, you know, a poor job of both of these. The best thing for me to do is you handle, you know, delegate it out. Like, you handle this emergency, I'm going to handle this one, and then let's just relay back and forth to what we need to each other. But I mean, just boom. I mean, in an instant, everything changes. So, and that was another example, because we followed up, you know, that person survived. I mean, we followed the last contact we had with them, I think, was like 3 years after the fire. And I mean, a long road to recovery, you know, for folks in that particular situation.
It speaks to the logistics of it,
Right.
but also, as you mentioned, you know, that can turn on a dime, but humanistically and existentially, you have this rise and fall, you know,
Right.
that you have this feeling of like
Exactly.
we're crushing it, and then this ironically
Yes.
crushing blow of, okay,
Mhm.
now we're, you know, now there's something else,
Right.
there's another acute event. And I think that even in the course of a shift, let alone a week or a career
Hmm.
in fire rescue, that there is that also not just the sleep interruption and the high and low of adrenaline build and dump,
Right.
but also this.
Well, I mean, and the same thing goes, because I, you know, for months, reanalyzed it over and over and over again. Like, could we, what if I had gone in the back door, right? Like, what if we had made, you know, what if I sent in the first 2 crews to only do search? And then I'm like, but I can't, what if the situation, the death, you're just beating yourself up, right? I mean, I think that there's a process that we need to go through to ensure, what did we learn from this scenario? And we absolutely did that. But I mean, the mental toll that, again, as the incident commander, where I was like, could I have done anything at all that would have changed the outcome of this? And I mean, I couldn't, yes, I suppose. But I think that even then it would have come at a cost of something else. And so you have to make the best decision you can with the information that you have available to you. And it's such a difficult thing, I think, for most people to, so like I said, we got our on-scene time's roughly 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes citywide, somewhere in that range. And that's from the time the tones come in. So then there's us running to the truck, putting all of this stuff on, getting in the truck, telling them we're going, looking at the computer, reading the notes, gathering information, trying to figure out where the closest hydrant is. And then what am I doing with the second, third, fourth, fifth truck that I have coming, and the ambulances and these other chiefs? Where do I tell them to park? What is the fire like? What are the conditions going to be like when I get there? Because then when you get there, all you see is this side of the house, that side of the house, this side of the house. All right, we're parked in front of the house. I have fire blowing out of this window. I've got smoke coming out of these windows. This truck's going to park here. The fire hydrant's here. Because the second you jump out of the truck, everybody else is looking to you like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? The amount of decisions that are being made in a split second for you to go back later and try to Monday morning quarterback yourself is awful.
And 4.5 minutes before that, you were asleep, right?
Yes.
So you're just trying to catch some.
And it's that rumination that kicks in. Oh, what if? And the
Yeah,
difficulties.
when we talk about Pandora's box, you think about, you know, some of the emotions that sit in there, the heaviest being guilt, shame, and regret. And so when we what if things, you know, there's a pretty major shift that has to happen when you go from I should have, or I
Right.
shouldn't have, to I could have or couldn't have, and then hopefully we get to a point where we can say, I wish I had been able to. It's a
Right.
very, very different thing. But for first responders who have this internal location of control, right, that you are the agent of change. It's very debilitating emotionally to think that all I can do is wish we had a different opportunity presented to us.
Right.
Or as you change the, you know, you can tell the verbiage going into the past is always a good thing. I did the best I could.
No, I mean, that's what you have to. I mean, and that's the one thing that we, you know, when we do these critical incident stress debriefs, right? When we sit down with folks after these traumatizing calls or these really complex incidents, it is so important to be able to highlight those things that were done positively, because at the end of the day, so we grow through training and then through past experiences, right? So you got to practice it, you got to read up on it, and then the rest you're going to get off of your past experiences and what we're so. But if you have a lot of these past experiences that maybe you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, it begins to attack your self-conscious and like, man, what else can I do to be better at this or prevent it from happening again? But oftentimes it's just so important to channel that into positivity and to use that as a motivator. Well, I'm going to go take these additional courses, or I'm going to practice this skill, or I'm going to work with my driver to talk about fastest routes, or we're going to really harp on water supply, or we're going to practice this drill over and over and over and over and over again, until we can't get it wrong. And so, but but at the end of the day, yeah, that's what they do. I think that they're great.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do the absolute best that they can on every call, and I challenge anybody to prove otherwise.
Mm-hmm. What would you like the listening community to know in terms of how they can support fire rescue and first responders in general?
So, in general, I will say specifically before I talk about anything in general, I tell people this all the time. I feel so blessed and honored to work in this community. I think that this county, I think that this city values its first responders like no other community in Florida, and then that's fire and law enforcement. We see that constantly. I know that my crews are out in the community all the time, receiving accolades and people thanking them for what it is that they do. And I appreciate that. I mean, so as a fire chief, I would tell the community, thank you first and foremost. I think it's more right now, it's what could they do to support us? I mean, I think it's things like this. Honestly, I think it's us being able to tell a story, maybe peel back the curtains of what the fire service is really like. I think that it is glorified in specific ways through media and movies, and I think that I don't know how to do that. We try to be as open and transparent as we can be, but the movie version of what we do and the real life version of what we do are two drastically different things, and in a lot of regards they're kind of the same, but it is not. I mean, so I think it's through education. I think it's through supporting programs like this that would maybe give first responders the opportunity to step away from the job. And I mean, but I don't know how else to answer that, but it's
And baked goods.
baked goods. Yeah, we do. We love that.
Your service actually accepts them.
We do.
Other
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
might look at them and wonder.
Blindly. So nothing but trust, just blind faith.
Right. That was a great story, Chief. Can you just briefly, tell that story about when folks come up with food?
Well, I
for
mean,
you?
so we were prior to being on the air, because I love our brothers and sisters in law enforcement. So we were discussing the differences between the two services, and police get thanked for what they do a lot, as do we. I think some police think that we get thanked more. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I think some of them think that. But anyway, we use the analogy of us being so accustomed to it, that we may have a warm pan of baked goods dropped off at the station. It's like blind trust. I mean, we take that stuff upstairs, it'll be half gone before it makes it to the rest of the crew. And it's like you drop the same pan off at the police department, or sit there and inspect it, fingerprint it, poke it, have a robot come out, a dog sniff it. Why are people being nice to us? In some communities, not in this one.
Right.
In some communities.
Yeah. That was a good laugh before.
It was.
We are greatly appreciative for your time. We know that you are dealing with a lot of things all at the same time at work, particularly with the pandemic and things happening in our world today. We appreciate your service wearing both uniforms in the military and fire rescue.
I'm almost done.
We can see it in your eyes.
can
We'll
make
have
it.
to have you back after that
I
day.
can make
Right.
it. Oh yeah, then I'll really. No, I wouldn't do that. But no, I appreciate it. I mean, so we've had the opportunity to work together now for several months. I am so proud of the work that we're doing together. I'm so glad that I opened the doors of our organization up to you, and I know that our members are too. I mean that. And when we sat down and first started on this venture, I was very, very clear with everybody that I wanted this to work, because the folks that were going to benefit from this were not just our firefighters, but that it was going to be first responders, all over Northeast Florida and hopefully the state. And I stand by that statement. So keep doing the great work that you're doing. I appreciate that very much.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. We appreciate you.
Pete, we are a few minutes before 1 o'clock, and I'm not sure if we are ready or able to run another interview, or we want to wait till this evening's. Absolutely. So we are going to do more of the same, different individuals who are going to be interviewed, all of which are going to be, 4 of the 5 are going to be live interviews, either via Zoom or in the studio here. And the other will be a pre-recorded interview with one of our law enforcement officers up in Clay County. And we're also going to be hearing from a family member and I believe someone from telecommunications. As well.
Yes, Lieutenant Smith is going to join us, and she was dual-headed, was EMS up in New York City, NYC, Nuevo York, and now she's a dispatcher with the county. So she'll be live and in person, and we'll have someone from Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And, you heard from Chief Hardwick. Well, we're going to be hearing from the real Chief Hardwick this evening, Kendall Hardwick.
The chiefette. That's
Chiefette.
that's what I call my wife.
Okay.
The
Chiefette
chiefette.
Hardwick. Kendall, if you're listening, we can't wait.
So we'll start back at 6:30, 18:30 for those who still work on military time. 6:30 to 8:30 this evening, and we hope that you join us. We hope that you take a look at our website, First Responder Project. Please consider reaching out to us. Reach us on the Get Involved page. Send us an email. Let us know how you'd like to get involved. If you'd like to volunteer, if you'd like to donate your time, talent, or treasure, we would be greatly appreciative on behalf of all first responders. Enjoy your afternoon, and we'll see you this evening.
Thank you so much.